Chapter 197. Shame-colored Wang Yutong's face. We weren't sworn brothers in the beginning. It was when the marshal died from vomiting blood that the marshal's son sent experts to infiltrate Yutong and kidnapped Shangguan Wudi's wife and child. Once he said that, the generals from the other countries looked at him in disdain. Every despicable method could be used on the battlefield, and the victor would always be the king. However, it was taboo to use unorthodox methods outside of the battlefield. The method of kidnapping and threatening others was the lowest and most unorthodox method. Once any general used this method, no matter how impressive he was before, what results he achieved in battle, or what achievements he would have in the future, he would no longer be qualified to be listed among the famous generals of the continent. Implicating one's wife and children was a great taboo in the military. To use such a despicable tactic against a hero of a generation was even more infuriating and contemptible. Shangguan Wudi was told that if he charged into the formation as promised and died in the end, his wife and child would be released. If he could be saved, the grudge would be forgotten. However, Shangguan Wudi's wife committed suicide immediately when she found out that she was being used to threaten her husband. The young son in her arms was killed by the woman as well. The woman said then, "How can a lowly life be compared to my husband? If my husband charged into the formation, he would die without a doubt. If I go and leave my son alive, when he grows up and finds out that his father died because of him, he would be ashamed for the rest of his life. Why don't you go to the netherworld with me? I've let you and your son down in this life, but I hope that I can make it up to you in my next life." After saying that, she killed her beloved son and committed suicide right away, a smile lingering on her lips. Shangguan Wudi charged into the formation and finally found out that his wife and child had died. He was heartbroken and decided to die in the midst of the army because he didn't want to live anymore. On the other side, Shangguan Lingxiu spoke in a cold voice. The passing of ancestor Wudi is a great humiliation to the Shangguan family. Since then, the Shangguan family swore that if they couldn't avenge this blood feud and end this karma, they would always worship the name of their sworn brother as a cover. Grandmother and little granduncle's memorial tablets will only be returned when the blood feud is avenged. This is the blood oath ancestor Wudi made with the qi of his dantian before he died. The descendants of Shangguan will remember it. All the generals immediately became solemn. It was also from then on that the continent established a new rule. No matter how one fought on the battlefield, no matter what methods one used, it was all within reason. However, one must not make things difficult for the family and children of one's opponent. Shangguan Lingxiu's voice was like a string of ice beads falling to the ground. Yin Yang asked from the side, "What counts as revenge?" The empire of Zio's old marshal Wang Yutong closed his eyes dejectedly. Shangguan Lingxiu said faintly, "The marshal of the empire of Zio back then was Zi Hengzhong. It was his son, Zi Yicheng, who committed such despicable acts after his death. Zi Yicheng then initiated a mutiny and chased the empire of Zio's emperor off his throne. His own family became royalty. It has lasted until today. To settle this grudge, the empire of Zio must be annihilated and Zio royalty must be exterminated. Only then will it end." The empire of Zio's marshal, Zi Yuanlong, wore a grim expression. He, too, was of the empire of Zio's royal bloodline. He could not help feeling shaken when faced with such a story. Shangguan Lingxiu looked at him and said coldly, "Marshal Zi, don't worry. We won't attack you when you're in Yutong. To kill you, we'll have to do it on the battlefield. To annihilate Zio, we'll have to break through the Zio formation in a dignified manner and charge into Zitian City. We'll eradicate the Zihuang bloodline in a dignified manner before the world's heroes." Shangguan Lingxiu said faintly, "The continent's military grudge is only acknowledged by the nations as the only one left. As for the rest, be it life or death, victory or defeat, there's no gratitude nor grudge." The so-called "no gratitude nor grudge" and "an invincible promise" came from this. Shangguan Lingxiu's expression was calm and collected. However, Yin Yang sucked in a cold breath when he heard what she said. To annihilate the empire of Zio and slaughter the entire royal family. This vengeance, seemed to be difficult to exact. Yin Yang had never been one to belittle himself. He could even be considered arrogant and thought highly of himself. However, Yin Yang did not have a plan to annihilate a nation's royalty with his own family at the moment. After all, it was a little too difficult. The Shangguan family, generation after generation, will not rest until one of us is dead. We'll fulfill this wish. No matter the cost, we'll reunite Ancestor Invincible's family in the underworld and in the netherworld. Shangguan Lingxiu said faintly after she finished. 50 to 60% of the Shangguan family's ancestors who are listed in the memorial tablets before us have such a story of invincible. If all of you wish to pay your respects to them one by one, I'm afraid it'll take too long. She was obviously asking them to leave. However, even Han San had dared not say anything in the face of the Shangguan family's eviction order. Among the densely packed memorial tablets, how many of them were more illustrious than his battle achievements? How many of them were the lifetime idols of the world's militants? They were not memorial tablets, they were the souls of the heroic warriors of the military. Every soldier who came here was a pilgrimage. The saying and the description was not an exaggeration at all. Everyone, please. Yin Yang called out, it's enough that your wish has been fulfilled. You should be content to pay your respects to the heroic spirits of the family of generals. Why are you still here? Let's go, let's go. Are you all so shameless that you insist on staying here for a meal? As he shouted, he shoved them out, chasing more than 100 generals from various countries out like they were ducks. Shangguan Lingxiu's almond-shaped eyes glanced at Yun Yang in surprise. Ever since she got to know Yun Yang, the impression that he had given her had always been one of politeness, gentleness, elegance, and grace. It was as if nothing could change Yun Yang's innate elegance and grace, which he was born with. However, the Yun Yang at this moment was a side that Shangguan Lingxiu had never seen before. He did not give them any face, he was very impolite, and there was a tinge of rascality in him. Was this the side of Yun Yang that he was facing his enemies? Shangguan Lingxiu's eyes were slightly curved as she said, everyone, please. As the group exited the Shangguan family of generals, everyone's hearts felt unusually heavy. After experiencing the solemnity and heaviness in the ancestral hall, their hearts were still heavy and uncomfortable. Even though the heroic soul had passed away many years ago, it was still as imposing as a mountain when he faced it. His might was unparalleled. Even if it was only the memorial tablet, the majesty was still there. When they walked out of the door, the rays of the setting sun shone on their faces, sending chills down their spines. They did not feel like they had stayed in the family of generals for long, so why was it already sunset when they came out? Since there's nothing to do tonight, this old man will not make any other arrangements. Everyone, rest early. Tomorrow morning, we'll go to the Broken Saber Pavilion. In the afternoon, we'll go to the Hall of Loyal Soul to pay our respects to our old rivals. Then, those who wish to return home can do so, Han Sanha said. Han Sanha's words had shortened the travel time by almost half, but none of the generals from various countries had any objections. After all, they had two main objectives for coming here, the military wine and the exploration of the residence of 9 Supremes. Now that they had drunk the wine, they had tried their best to explore the residence of 9 Supremes. Other than that, there was really nothing else that he had to do. Rather than staying here and feeling the hostile gazes of the entire nation, it did not feel good. Moreover, there was Yun Yang, the tour guide, who was constantly nagging and disturbing them. It was best to leave early. Besides, other than Dongxian, the exploration of the residence of 9 Supremes had also damaged the high-end combat power of each country. A conservative estimate would be that 10% of the country's high-end combat power had been lost. This loss had to be compensated as soon as possible, or else there would be hidden threats. Therefore, it was more important to return home as soon as possible. It's good that you're fine. Then I shall go home tonight and not accompany you all. These 2 days have really tired me out. This job is F*King difficult, I need to drink more water to replenish myself. Yin Yang seemed to be relieved. Yin Yang seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, but he did not know that it was the generals from the other countries who were truly relieved. They were afraid that this fellow would use his mouth again. In spite of this, all of them were grumbling inwardly. You need to drink more water to replenish yourself? You're only thirsty because you scold us. This bastard. Han Sanha smiled faintly and said, "Thank you for your hard work, young Marquis Yun. It's my duty." Yun Yang chuckled. You all know the way back to the inn, don't you? I guess all of you won't be in the mood to gamble anymore. Why don't you just cancel the scheduled itinerary? The generals from Daiyuan snorted and said, Does Yutang forbid gambling and playing with small amounts of money? Yun Yang rubbed his nose and said, Of course it's not forbidden. I'm mainly afraid that after you all go in, they'll target you all and make you feel like you're facing a formidable enemy. You won't be happy and you won't be able to enjoy yourself. Especially if there's a situation where winning or losing matters and someone dies, you'll be buried in a foreign land and won't be able to return. F***ck. The generals screamed inwardly, What have we done? Why does it matter if we win or lose? Why do we have to be buried in a foreign land and won't be able to return? We really shouldn't have imagined that this fellow would say anything nice and not insult us. One of Daiyuan's generals could not hold it in any longer and retorted, How can you be sure that we won't be the ones slaughtering everyone? It matters if you win or lose, but what if you lose your pants? Just tell me if you can find a place to gamble, there's no need for such nonsense. Yin Yang chuckled. Do you really want to play so badly? If you all really want to play, I can organize a single round for you all. What do you think? Single round? The generals felt that this child was up to no good again and had set up a trap. What single round? What single round? Are you going to participate personally? Their voices were filled with caution. Chapter 198. Why should I? I can't be gambling buddies with all of you, but I have a few brothers and friends who are currently in Tiantang City. I believe all of you have heard about them. They are the 4 young masters of the 4 noble families of spring, summer, autumn, and winter. Other than being filthy rich, they are just as bored as all of you. If all of you want to play, I'll let the 4 of them play with all of you, win or lose, just for fun. This way, the range isn't too big and there's no additional hostility. Yin Yang smiled sincerely. Of course, if you're not willing to play or can't afford to, then forget it. Gambling with them requires a certain amount of courage and wealth. It won't be fun if you're not careful. When the generals of the various countries heard this, their interest was piqued, especially the few old gamblers among them, who felt even more itchy and unbearable. Yin Yang's provocation aside, the title of the 4 noble young masters was a huge temptation. Yin Yang not playing? Gambling with the 4 noble young masters? That was not a problem at all. As long as Yin Yang did not participate in the game himself, there was no need to worry about cheating. After all, the 4 noble young masters were famous popinjays in the continent, almost everyone knew about them. Who knows, they might even be able to get to know each other through this gamble. Even if they could not build any kind of relationship, gambling was something that depended on luck. There were so many of them here, surely their luck would be much better than those 4 fellows? The crowd had even begun to imagine that they did not need to win much, as long as each of them could win a few hundred pots of wine, it would be enough. What's the big deal about playing around? Let's set this single round for tonight. Can you arrange it? A bearded general asked. It was the general who had invited Daiyuan. He was still feeling the pinch after spending so much money. Now that there was a chance to recoup his losses, how could he let it go? Will this single round be arranged in a regular casino? Another person asked. There was a big problem with this question. Under normal circumstances, there were too many experts in the profound sky continent. Controlling gambling devices remotely and interfering with the key to winning or losing was simply too easy and too common. Therefore, any slightly larger casino would set up golden profound stones. The so-called golden mystic stone was the forbidden mystic stone. In the casino, as long as there was a golden mystic stone, then within the range of the golden mystic stone's influence, no one would be able to freely use profound qi. Of course, the gold mysterious stone could only affect a cultivator's use of qi on a small scale. It could not really suppress the use of qi on a large scale. For example, if a cultivator burst out qi regardless of anything, the gold mysterious stone would no longer have any effect. However, those who used qi to cheat in the casino all used delicate and subtle methods, which were restrained by the gold mysterious stone. Other than that, there was a limit to the golden mystic rock's limitations. It would be difficult for the golden mystic rock to be effective against an expert above the 9th peak. However, the problem was, which expert above the 9th peak would be so bored as to play in a casino? Even if they did, it would be for real. Why would they use high-level mystical energy to deceive themselves? On the other hand, relatively large casinos would often use golden mystic stones as floor tiles to completely cut off the possibility of cheating. That was why that person had asked such a question. It wasn't difficult to guess that this person was definitely a frequent customer of the casino. Whether it's legal or not, we'll know immediately after we try it. Yin Yang smiled and said, "The casino I mentioned even has a ceiling made of golden mystical rock." The generals were relieved when they heard him. There was really no possibility of cheating then. They could only rely on luck and skill. Almost everyone who liked to gamble felt that they were the best when it came to these two aspects. "Let's go tonight." For a moment, 30 to 40 people's eyes lit up. Those experienced and prudent generals, or those with high authority, would not go to such a place. Those who responded were basically generals in their 30s and 40s. Some of them were even winking at Yin Yang. Yin Yang snorted inwardly. This group of fellows, firstly, wanted to win money and look for excitement. Secondly, it was because there was something going on. Especially the collusion between the generals of these few countries. There seemed to be quite a number of people who hadn't come to an agreement during this period. Perhaps they wanted to take this opportunity to communicate and discuss the possibility of cooperation, or perhaps they were simply plotting something with each other. Yin Yang was well aware of these matters and said, "That's settled then. I'll arrange it now. I'll bring everyone there after dinner. We'll meet at the entrance of the tower to heaven and then. Be there or be square. Leave quickly. Let everyone have a good time tonight. I won't be a hindrance to all of you." The generals rolled their eyes. "This child knows that he's causing trouble for us as well." Han Sanha smiled and said, "Young Marquis Yun, don't forget that the blood of the hero that we've ordered will change on the day of our return. Please supervise us." Yin Yang replied, "That won't be a problem. Actually, they're already working on it. When you leave, at least the first batch will go with you. I've already given the silver taels from the other day to the merchant, but when you take the first batch of wine away, you'll have to settle the remaining silver taels. This can't be helped. After all, they need cash to circulate as well. Just give me the money when the time comes." Han Sanha guffawed. "Of course. Besides, we're not afraid that young Marquis Yun will go back on his word." After a few words, Yin Yang chuckled and turned to leave. "Before the casino tonight, let's go through the follow-up plan of the four empires again," Han Sanha said in a low voice. The old marshals nodded silently. Perhaps the biggest gain from this trip was the plan of the four empires that these old men had come up with in the past few days. Other than that, there was nothing else that could be said about it. If it's possible, this old man hopes that Han Sanha's voice was as soft as a mosquito's hum. That Yutong will be completely crippled in our hands, or even annihilated. So, old brothers, please keep your spirits up. Don't make any mistakes on your side. Of course. Of course. Our hearts are all in the same boat." Yin Yang had only stayed for a short while when he returned home before he turned into a light breeze in his room and sped towards the residence of 9 Supremes. He had to go, he could not be late. Too many experts had died in their last night. More importantly, 6 high-level mystical beasts had perished as well. If Yin Yang had been late, the mystical cores of the 6 mystical beasts would have been dissolved into pure energy by the 9 heavens domain. The 6 mystical beasts, especially the 6 mystical cores, were a huge fortune to Yun Yang, who was currently broke. He could not afford to miss it. How could he allow them to be melted away? The night was dark, the boundless darkness shrouding the heaven and earth. Only the residence of 9 Supremes was still shrouded in clouds and mist. The only similarity was that one could not even see one's own fingers. A gust of wind blew quietly. Yun Yang had entered the residence of 9 Supremes soundlessly. He had done so without anyone noticing. 18 to 19 corpses were scattered on the ground made of an unknown material. Each of them had died in the same manner. They were all charred black, even their bones had been charred. Yun Yang heaved a soft sigh. He had thought that these people would have brought something good with them when they came in. Perhaps he could earn an extra fortune from the dead. It was no wonder that Yun Yang was so greedy for money that he would not even let the dead go. He was just too poor right now, so poor that his pockets were even cleaner than his face. It was a pity that the experts from various countries who had perished in the residence of 9 Supremes had some banknotes on them, but they had all turned to dust by now. Despite his disappointment, Yun Yang's trip had not been in vain. There were still some sparkling items on the ground that were worth the price of his return ticket. Yun Yang picked up the sparkling items one by one. He had actually picked up hundreds of mystical stones and dozens of mystical crystals. Just this alone was already a considerable harvest. Besides, there were a few sabers and swords that he could have gotten his hands on as well. They were the personal weapons of these martial artists, and they were definitely not ordinary weapons that could survive the 9 heavens domain's thunder calamity wind. However, Yin Yang did not touch them. Firstly, he already had the divine edge, so other weapons were no longer of interest to him. Secondly, these people had died in the residence of 9 Supremes. If he sold these personal weapons and traded them, it would inevitably reveal something and leave traces. The hall on the other side, however, made Yun Yang overjoyed. The hall was the focus of Yun Yang's trip, the 6 mystical beasts. Yun Yang examined them and found at the highest level of the 6 mystical beasts was 8th level intermediate, while the other 3 were 8th level beginner level. Even the 2 weakest ones were 7th level pinnacle. Of course, what surprised him the most was that the corpses of these mystical beasts were all well preserved. It was not difficult to imagine that the ability of mystical beasts to withstand the natural forces of heaven and earth was much stronger than that of a human being. The clouds of the residence of 9 Supremes had already surrounded them, absorbing the spiritual chi in the air and absorbing it into the clouds. It was fortunate that Yun Yang had come earlier. If he had come any later, the remains of the 2 7th-level pinnacle mystical beasts might not have been able to resist the invasion of the clouds. Yun Yang, who was familiar with the power of the 9 heavens domain, dared not delay. He flashed the divine edge with a swoosh and was about to collect the mystical cores with a single slash. However, before Yun Yang could move, he stopped abruptly. This was because the moment the blade of heavens will appeared, the surrounding clouds suddenly parted in all directions with a glint of the blade's light. Chapter 199. The change was out of Yun Yang's expectation. The clouds of the residence of 9 Supremes dared not approach the divine edge. This saber actually has such an advantage. Yun Yang thought of other aspects immediately. If this saber can be effective on all the objects in this world that are cloud, fog, smoke, and air, those mysterious places that are covered in fog all year round, those mystical lands that are filled with miasma, doesn't it mean that as long as I hold this saber, I'll have a bright future? Yun Yang was overjoyed, but the effect of the divine edge on objects in the air still had to be further verified. It was more important for him to collect the remains of the 6 mystical beasts. With the saber in hand, Yun Yang quickly retrieved the mystical cores of the mystical beasts and dried the outer layer with mystical chi. After a simple treatment, the mystical cores that were initially wrapped in the flesh and blood of the mystical beasts were now round and clean. It seemed like Yun Yang was exceptionally familiar with handling such matters, and he was overflowing with enthusiasm. These were all treasures. However, how should he use these mystical cores? Should he give them to Emmy for nourishment? Or should he give them to the four noble young masters to auction in exchange for his and Emmy's cultivation resources? In all fairness, of course, it would be better to let the four noble young masters auction them. The gains would be greater and it would be beneficial in the long run. However, Yin-Yang could feel Emmy moving in his subconscious space. It was twisting and turning, its soft cries filled with pleas for food. Yin-Yang knew the pros and cons, but he could not hold himself back and gave half of it to Emmy. Emmy accepted the mystical core with glee and placed it at its roots, burying it in a hole dug with its vines. After a while, it was even more delighted. The two leaves swayed together as the emerald green vines danced in the air, twisting and turning as they cried out incessantly. It was like a child who had suddenly received delicious food, overjoyed. Although the pauper Yin-Yang had given away half of his newly acquired gains in an instant, he felt his heart soften when he felt Emmy's joy. With a chuckle, he returned immediately. There would be a sumptuous banquet later. As long as everything went smoothly, he believed that there would be a large sum of money that would help him escape the title of pauper. Boss is inviting us to gamble? Dong Tianlong clutched the letter, his face filled with shock and disbelief. This matter is a little strange. They want us to gamble, and we can only win and not lose. Go. Why not? Chen Wanfeng's eyes lit up. I've been bored out of my mind these past few days. Xia Bingchuan, do you really have eggs? Qiu Yunsan asked, why isn't that old eunuch doing anything? Didn't he promise to give us the luminary paste? What's wrong with this old bastard? Should we tell boss and go directly to the palace to find him? The luminary paste was a big deal. There's also boss's share. Everyone looked askance at him. Dong Tianlong raised his voice. Oh, young Master Qiu seems to be in a hurry for the luminary paste. TSK, I heard that it's good for men. TSK, young Master Qiu is in such a hurry. TSK, is it because, Chen Wanfeng, young Master Qiu can't take it anymore. Xia Bingchuan, so young Master Qiu can't make it. Qiu Yunsan was enraged. Who said that? Who said that? All of you, stop talking nonsense. We still have to support boss tonight. Tell me, how are we going to win against those guys? How much silver should I bring? Also, do we need a secret code? Dong Tianlong guffawed. Qiu Yunsan is changing the topic again. Ha ha ha. It looks like this fellow really can't take it anymore. Oh my god, young Master Qiu, how old are you? This. Sigh, I suddenly feel like I'm not classy when I'm with you. Chen Wanfeng chimed in, people say that one takes on the color of one's company. Could it be that those who can't take it anymore? Why don't young Master Qiu stay away from us? Xia Bingchuan agreed. That's right, that's exactly what I'm thinking. Qiu Yunsan was flushed as he shouted angrily, you're the one who can't take it anymore. All of you can't take it anymore. I only wanted to fight for some benefits for everyone. Who would have thought that all of you would be so cunning and shameless? Dong Tianlong slapped the table and guffawed. Ha ha ha. So Qiu Yunsan really can't take it anymore. Qiu Yunsan really can't take it anymore. Dong Tianlong's voice was loud and deafening, traveling far and wide. Qiu Yunsan's face turned purple. He rushed up to cover his mouth. Brother, you're my biological brother, all right? Lower your voice. When they arrived at the towering wind pavilion, the three great young masters of Chen, Xia, and Dong were still laughing like washbasins. Their hearty laughter could be heard a few streets away. Qiu Yunsan followed behind with his head hung low, his face pale. Shui Wuyin rolled his eyes as he looked at these fellows. He had heard the three lunatics' laughter when they were 3 streets away. As the laughter got closer, they had actually entered the towering wind pavilion. They were still laughing after entering the pavilion. Had their laughing acupoints been struck at the same time? Ha ha ha. This is a casino. Ha ha ha. The environment here isn't bad at all. Ha ha ha. Why isn't boss here yet? Shui Wuyin really wanted to roar, F*CKU. What's there to laugh like this? All of you are crazy. It did not take long. Under Yun Yang's lead, a large group of people arrived in a mighty manner. There were more than 60 gamblers from various countries. There were quite a number of generals from various countries who had come this time. Those who stayed in the inn and did not come out were mostly experienced and prudent people. Those that Yun Yang had brought along were basically below 40 years of age. Once they entered the towering wind pavilion, their eyes shone. Starting from 3 feet into the door, the walls on both sides, the floor and the ceiling were filled with forbidden mystical stones. Under many of the gambling tables in the hall, the forbidden mystical stones were densely arranged. Even the edges of the tables were embedded with forbidden mystical stones that were emitting a faint red glow. They were the ultimate grade forbidden mystical stones. Not to mention anything else, just based on the current situation, even a 10th perfection grandmaster would not be able to use Xian Qi to cheat. Even if no one noticed it, the ultimate grade forbidden dark stone would automatically emit a white light warning. What a great place. The bearded officer's eyes shone. I love fair competition the most. This casino has the most forbidden mystical stones I've ever seen. The 4 popinjays stood up at the same time. Wow, boss, long time no see. Yun Yang laughed and introduced them enthusiastically. Once the generals heard the word boss, their expressions darkened for a long time. Were they all this fellow's underlings? They had thought that as long as Yun Yang did not join the game, they could avoid a certain someone's trickery to the greatest extent. However, they were all his underlings, the probability of them playing tricks behind his back was much higher. However, most of the people who looked at Yun Yang's expression were more curious. The 4 young masters of the 4 noble families actually called this fellow boss? What was going on? Many of them could not help but reevaluate Yun Yang. After all, everyone knew how proud and arrogant the young masters of the 4 great clans were. Even if he was an ignorant and incompetent hedonist, his standards were definitely high. How could they call someone boss so easily? Either that, or they were completely subdued. Or perhaps, this person was hiding a shocking profit on him. Other than these few possibilities, there were no other possibilities. No matter what kind of ability Yun Yang possessed, he was a dangerous character that was worthy of people's attention and vigilance. In spite of this, everyone's attention was quickly drawn to the gambling table. No matter how dangerous Yun Yang was, it was something that would happen after today. It would not be too late to think about it in the future. They would gamble today and enjoy themselves to the fullest. The problematic characters would be dealt with tomorrow. Come to the gambling table, we're all brothers. Come, we only recognize gold and silver here. Waha, we recognize treasures of heaven and earth, mystical stones and mystical crystals too. Dong Tianlang leaped onto the table and roared, come, what do you all want to play? How about dice? Pai Gao? If you really have a special hobby, there's even a mahjong table over there. F*CK, this casino is of a high class. They have all sorts of gambling devices. Great. Come, just for this young master will be the banker first. Come. Spear of Dragon Emperor Dong Dong. Ka. Everyone turned to look at him when they heard him. Could this young master of the Dong family be an impostor? The legendary young master of a noble family was actually purple. In spite of this, everyone was really here to play today. It was proper for them to observe the situation first. They were all experienced gamblers. After one round, they could basically tell whether someone was cheating or not. Obviously, Dong Tianlang and even the 4 noble young masters were all sheep. At least, they were not the type to cheat. Everyone swarmed forward at once. The 4 noble young masters were the bankers on their own tables for the time being, chasing the original bankers away. Instantly, they shouted and cheered as gold, silver, and banknotes flew everywhere. the dozen or so people went to another table to play mahjong quietly. Was this something that needed to be discussed? Shui Wuyin greeted them calmly, pacing around each table with his hands behind his back, a faint smile on his face. Seeing that everyone was already having a great time, it's so crowded today, so many unfamiliar faces. How about I join in? A voice came quietly from the door. A person dressed in white suddenly appeared in the casino, not a speck of dust on him. Yin Yang frowned and glanced at Shui Wuyin. Shui Wuyin was surprised as well. The casino had been closed immediately after the group of sheep had entered. How did this person come in? Shui Wuyin's expression did not waver as he asked with a smile, "Friend, what is your name?" The person dressed in white replied coldly, "Friend? I dare not. I'm only a gambler. Since you've opened your doors to do business, surely you wouldn't reject a guest who's here to support you?" Shui Wuyin's smile grew gentler, his tone gentler as he said softly, "There are friends everywhere. Since you've come to this place, you're my esteemed guest. What does it matter how you address me?" The person dressed in white's face looked like it was covered in a layer of frost as he said, "I'll say it again. I'm not your friend, you're not my friend either." Yin Yang observed this uninvited guest from the side, feeling that the person dressed in white was actually rather familiar. However, he had never seen this person's face before. Hold on, Yin Yang's thoughts cleared up as he recalled the white silhouette that First Court King Qingguang had been pursuing relentlessly that night. "If you don't have enough money to be the banker, then get out of here and let me do it." Dong Tianlong cried, "Not enough capital? Today, I will make sure all of you lose so badly that you will take off your pants and walk out. I'm so angry, so angry." Yin Yang shouted from the periphery, "Dong Tianlong, I'm telling you, if there's even one of these fellows who walks out with his pants on, you better King go home with me. The mission I'm giving you, the price is clearly stated. You have to win them all, not even a pair of underwear is allowed." Dong Tianlong howled, "Don't worry, boss, I'll CK them to death." The generals chortled as well. "How dare you boast so shamelessly when you're alone? Watch us brothers take turns to kill you." Again. Young Master Chiu slammed a bunch of banknotes on the table, his face flushed. "Your father doesn't have anything else but money." There were at least 40 to 50 banknotes in the thick stack of banknotes, and the lowest denomination on top was 10,000 taels. Once such a large sum of money was revealed, a new wave of excitement was ignited. Amidst the strange cries, the gambling began once again. Yin Yang and Shui Wuyin walked around and saw that these fellows were gambling themselves hoarse and were extremely engrossed. They walked to the side and gathered together. "How is it?" Yin Yang asked. "The man in white only watches and doesn't gamble. He has watched more than a dozen rounds up until now but has yet to make a move." Shui Wuyin said, "This person either has an ulterior motive or he's a veteran. I'm leaning towards the latter." Yin Yang did not ask clearly, but Shui Wuyin knew who he was asking about and what he was asking about. "Why do you have such a judgment?" Yin Yang asked. "I believe that Supreme Cloud can tell that this person is an expert." Shui Wuyin's eyes glinted with a sharp glint. "The aura I feel in front of him is as majestic as a mountain, and this mountain is an iceberg, a bone-chilling iceberg. This person's cultivation base can be said to be higher than anyone I've ever seen." Shui Wuyin's voice was hoarse as he spoke slowly but in an exceptionally serious tone. "Although this gamble of ours has been premeditated, the date has yet to be determined. It can still be attributed to chance. It would be too far-fetched to say that such an expert has come with a purpose. That's why I'm leaning towards this person coming in to try his luck, because he's short of money. After all, our towering wind pavilion's reputation is rather good. As long as he wins with real ability, he can take any amount of money with him. Logically speaking, there's no reason for an expert like this to be short of money. Even if he was short of money, he would have a channel to earn it. However, there are only two possibilities for him to come here. Either he doesn't have a channel to obtain supplies here, or he simply likes to gamble." He's chosen to earn money through gambling, a risky method, and isn't willing to use other methods. This person should be a more principled person. Shui Wuyin said, such a person would usually be well prepared and would never allow himself to fall into such a predicament. Therefore, he must have his difficulties. Such difficulties, other than a powerful enemy, there's hardly anything else that could force such a person to such a state. Shui Wuyin's voice was slow. After each sentence, he would ponder for a while before speaking slowly. Finally, he concluded, if I'm not wrong, this person must have a formidable enemy in Tiantang City that he can't fight against. This formidable enemy might even be a formidable character that he can't defend against. Once they meet, it'll be difficult for him to even escape. Pure admiration flowed from Yun Yang's eyes. Eighth brother was right. Shui Wuyin's mind was truly remarkable. Based on the fact that the other party had come in to gamble, he was able to deduce the truth of the matter. It was more than rare. If Yun Yang had not seen this man in white being hunted down by First Court King Qingguang, he might not have been able to deduce to this extent. On the other hand, it was because Yun Yang knew the background of the man in white that he knew that Shui Wuyin's deduction was not wrong at all. It was not difficult for him to take advantage of the situation. Since he wants to win, let him lose. However, 50 silver taels is too little. Yun Yang said in a low voice with a smile. Shui Wuyin understood tacitly and said in a low voice as well, I'll go take a look then. He then left with a sleeve of his arms. Yun Yang smiled faintly and stood where he was, waiting for the good news. In this casino, there must be a large amount of forbidden mystical stone, genuine and genuine. Even if a pinnacle expert were to come and use mystical qi, it would be impossible to be completely silent and flawless. This understanding was absolutely correct, and it was what all the gamblers were most at ease about. However, having the forbidden mystical stone did not mean that there was no way to cheat. At least, in this realm, there was still one person who could resort to underhanded tricks. Shui Wuyin. Under the premise that all the cultivators in the continent cultivated mystical qi, Shui Wuyin, as a mysterious member of the Ling clan, cultivated the Ling clan's cultivation method. He could use the power of his soul to intervene and achieve the goal of changing the final outcome of the game without a trace. This should be the main reason why Eighth Brother made Towering Wind Pavilion into a casino and not some other business. Yun Yang despised his eighth brother inwardly. This fellow's plan from the beginning was to cheat others. With such an undetectable cheating presence, it's hard not to profit from opening a casino. On the other side, the man in white had watched 20 to 30 rounds and seemed to have finally made up his mind. The moment he saw Chiu Yun-san put down the dice cup, he placed 50 silver taels on 7 without hesitation. Single bet. Single bet was a relatively rare betting method for dice gambling. 3 dice would roll a maximum of 18 points, and the minimum would be 3 points. There were a total of 16 single bet options, so once the bet was made, the odds would increase tenfold. If he had bet on 7 points, Chiu Yun-san would have to pay 500 silver taels. A tenfold return. However, no matter how high the odds were, there was only a 1 in 16 chance. How could it be easy to bet on it? The people around were all surprised. Was there really such a game? Was he really so confident? Or was he desperate to lose? Had he not gone crazy from wanting to get rich? Shui Wuyin stood outside the crowd, watching with his arms folded. Chiu Yun-san opened the dice cup amidst his guffaws, only to see 3 dice inside. 1 was 2 points, 1 was 1, and 1 was 4 points. The total number of the 3 dice was actually 7, F***ck me. It's really 7 points? Chiu Yun-san craned his neck, his eyes almost popping out of their sockets. Am I seeing a ghost? Chiu Yun-san cursed, but his hand did not hesitate, pushing 500 silver taels to the man in white. Although it was a tenfold return, the man in white's starting bet was too little. It was only 50 silver taels, a meager sum. The people around him couldn't help but sigh at how good this person's luck was. How could such great luck fall on his head alone? They also lamented that they didn't place a few thousand or 10,000 taels of silver on 7 points. Otherwise, they would have struck it rich too. The man in white, on the other hand, stood tall, his expression indifferent. It was clear that he had expected this outcome, and it was completely within his expectations. Chapter 201. Following that, the man in white no longer placed single bets but blended into the crowd and switched to betting on big or small. However, he won every single one of his 4 bets. His initial 500 taels turned into 4,000 taels. All the generals were veterans in the casino. How could they not know that this person was truly an expert in gambling? At least, he was highly accomplished in listening to the dice. They all hoped that he would keep up the good work and win a few more bets. Many of them were secretly delighted that they had seen through this person's prowess earlier. They had followed the crowd and won a lot just now. The opportunity to make a fortune had fallen from the sky. Once the man in white's valiant achievement was announced, the generals from the other tables came as well. They swarmed over like sharks that had smelled fresh blood. Just as everyone was staring at the man in white, waiting for him to place his bets so that they could follow the crowd and make a fortune, the man in white casually kept the banknotes and returned to his spectator mode. A Dongxian general beside the man in white could not help urging him when he saw that the man in white was not placing his bets. "Brother, place your bets quickly. We're all waiting for you." The man in white's gaze froze, but he did not reply. It was as if he really had no intention of placing his bets, completely ignoring the attention around him. As far as the man in white was concerned, he already had 4,000 taels of silver. He only needed to observe for a while longer, concentrate his energy, listen out the exact numbers, and place a single bet. Then, he would be able to obtain 40,000 taels of silver. With this 40,000 taels, it would be enough for his expenses for the time being. One should not be too greedy. In any case, with the existence of this casino, he could always come back if he ran out of money. The situation today was very strange. The men around him were all tall and sturdy, and they all had a boundless murderous aura around them. He was afraid that they were all from the military and were definitely not ordinary people. If he really got entangled by this group of people, although he was not afraid, it would still be troublesome. The man in white's gaze was focused. Almost no one noticed that his ears were trembling slightly. Chiu Yun-san, who had lost 4 rounds in a row, held the dice cup in his hand and spun it up and down, left and right. Suddenly, the dice cup flew into the air and slapped the table in a practiced manner as he guffawed. "Place your bets, place your bets. Don't you dare to place your bets now that there's no beacon. Place your order. Caw 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 caw." Seeing that the man in white really did not place his bets, and hearing Chiu Yun-san's clamor, the generals could not help but squeal as they waved their banknotes and slammed them on the table. The man in white hesitated for a moment, then pushed all the silver notes in his hand into an empty space. It was a single bet again. But this time, everyone's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. They looked at the man in white as if they were looking at an immortal. Because the white-robed man's single bet this time was shockingly 18 points. This white-clothed man was actually suppressing the ancestor of 6666, leopard. The ancestor of 18 points, the leopard, was a single bet, but it was different from the usual points. It was a unique point and the probability of it appearing was less than 1 in a million. Therefore, the odds of a single bet had to be multiplied by 10. In other words, once the bet was made, the odds would be 100 times. If the leopard really appeared this time, Chiu Yun-san would have to pay 400,000 taels just for the man in white alone. It was such a huge bet. The man in white felt extremely helpless about this. In all honesty, he only wanted to win 40,000 taels. However, he had clearly heard that this Chiu Yun-san fellow had pulled out all the tricks in this round. He had really shaken out a leopard. Since the other party had gotten it and he had heard it too, then, it was obvious that 400,000 taels had been delivered to him. How could he not accept it? The corner of Chiu Yun-san's mouth twitched. Is this really boss's friend? This friend is a little ruthless. Reaching out to flip the dice cup, his palm was actually trembling. Finally, with a roar, he lifted the dice cup. If I lose, I lose. It's Chiao Yunsan's virtue to admit defeat when I'm willing to bet. The dice cup was lifted. Everyone looked down and saw 3 dice lying quietly on the ground. One was 6 points, another was 6 points, and the last one was 5 points. 17 points. Wrong bet. The other generals were more concerned about winning or losing. After a momentary pause, they started making a ruckus again. F***CK. I lost again. I've won. I've won this round, huh? The man in white's gaze froze, staring at the shining 17 points on the table. He did not move his gaze away for a long time. What was going on? Chiao Yun-san was definitely not playing any tricks, this was something he could be absolutely sure of. Before the dice were revealed, the number below was definitely 18 points. However, why was it 17 points after the dice were revealed? Outside the crowd, Shui Wuyin wore a faint smile as he left, checking the tables one by one. The man in white looked at the 17 points on the table quietly, watching Chiao Yun-san laugh as he swept away the banknotes. Then, he turned and left without any expression. Yin Yang was already at the door. He had even taken an armchair and was sitting comfortably with his legs crossed, swaying from side to side. Seeing the man in white walking over, he asked in surprise, "What? Not playing anymore? Not going to play a few more rounds?" The man in white's expression was ugly. With a snort, he walked out. Yin Yang chuckled. Lost? Lost everything? This fellow was annoying. The man in white frowned. He almost could not suppress his anger. If it had only been the 50 taels from the start, it would have been fine if he had lost. However, after some twists and turns, it had reached 4,000 taels. That was a huge sum of money. It was all gone in one go. He had lost 4,000 taels of silver, not 50. Looking at the man in white's gloomy expression, Yun Yang chuckled inwardly. This was Shui Wuyin's tactic. He would let you win first, win to a certain extent, then let you lose everything in one go. The agony would be pushed to the extreme. His boss had said that losing 50 taels was too little. Then he would let him win more first and clean it all up in one go. It's only 50 silver taels. So be it if you've lost. It's not worth it. Yin Yang smiled amicably. You're welcome to come again. The man in white snorted, wanting to ignore him and walk out. However, he could not help retorting, I've lost 4,000 taels. Yin Yang chuckled. How could there be 4,000 taels? You admitted that you only had 50 taels then. Even if you've won 4,000 taels in the process, the 3,950 taels are only chips. They don't truly belong to you. It's good that you didn't lose the bet, but a bet is a bet. What you took away in the end is yours. What you brought in the beginning is also the one that lost. The man in white's face turned green, but he was speechless. Leaving after losing? What a good gambler. Still, you can't help feeling a little disappointed. Sigh, 50 shiny taels of silver are gone just like that. Sigh, 50 taels of silver as a base, and all the way up to 4,000 taels of silver. Just like that, I can imagine how upset I feel. Sigh, there's nothing I can do about it. Who doesn't want to win when they're here to gamble? Let it go, this is life, life. Yin Yang comforted the man in white incessantly, but the man's expression grew darker the more he listened. Finally, he stopped and turned to look at Yin Yang, saying in a low voice, "Shut up." Yin Yang's eyes widened. What? I say, didn't you just lose 50 silver taels? Do you have to be so anxious? I tried to comfort you out of goodwill, but you're still throwing a tantrum at me. My goodwill has gone to waste. That's the last 50 silver taels I have with me. The man in white said in a low voice, I don't wish for anyone to use this against me. The last 50 silver taels, Yin Yang nodded. This is indeed worthy of sympathy. Still, are you leaving just like that? Do you need me to lend you some silver taels? To recoup your losses? The man in white's eyes shone. You can lend it to me? Yin Yang said, helping others is helping yourself. But you must have something as collateral. Of course, I'll need to pay interest when I borrow silver taels. The man in white took out a jade pendant. How about this? Sure. Yin Yang took it and studied it carefully, weighing it in his hand. He said in a low voice, I don't know the value of this jade pendant, but it's not a problem to pawn it for 3,000 silver taels. 3,000 silver taels. The man in white sucked in a deep breath. This is the heart of the sea jade. Yin Yang rolled his eyes. Just tell me if you can lend it to me or not. Yes. The man in white swallowed his anger, almost suffocating to death. However, he had no silver taels on him and had lost his last 50 silver taels. If he really did not lend it to him, what should he do next? Did he really have to steal, rob, or do something so despicable? With these 3,000 silver taels, there was at least a chance to recoup his losses. So what if the interest was high? Who did not know that borrowing money from a casino had a high interest rate? But that was for ordinary people. Did he think that he was a fool who did not know how to gamble? Taking the 3,000 silver taels, the man in white snorted and glanced at Yin Yang from the corner of his eyes. You're not allowed to leave. I've remembered you. Once I win, I'll redeem this jade pendant immediately. That's not a problem at all. Yin Yang was beaming. I wish you victory and a killing spree here and now. Right, there's one more thing I need to make clear. If you return me 3,000 silver taels within an hour, the jade pendant will still be yours. However, if it's past an hour, you'll need 3,500 silver taels to clear your debt. What a scoundrel. He dared to ask for 1/6 of the mother gold's interest within an hour. How could this be considered a loan shark? This was robbery. No, it was even more vicious than robbery. The man in white snorted and walked in. He didn't even try to bargain. Obviously, he was very confident in himself. Half a quarter of an hour later, the man in white walked to Yin Yang with exasperation. The veins on his face were bulging and his temples were throbbing. You've recouped your losses so quickly. Brother, you're in luck this time. Yin Yang asked despite knowing the answer. The man in white was already in a bad mood. Hearing Yin Yang's words, his expression darkened. Have you lost? Yin Yang looked at the man in white in shock and disbelief, saying, how did you lose so quickly? It's only been half a quarter of an hour. We agreed on an hour just now. You don't have to be so anxious. Chapter 202. What good stuff do you have? Take it out for a look. As long as I like it, it's not a problem to pawn it, Yin Yang said. A quarter of an hour later, the man in white's expression darkened. I still have a piece of stellar steel here. 10,000 silver taels should be no problem, right? No problem. An hour later, the man in white stood in front of Yin Yang, gritting his teeth. I'm not gambling anymore. What the F***CK? That's more than 30,000 silver taels. Boss, you've lost it all in less than 2 hours. I finally know why you lost 4,000 silver taels in one go. Yin Yang shook his head and sighed, speaking earnestly, I advise you not to gamble anymore. You're too focused on your gains and losses. You're not suited for gambling at all. A small gamble is good for the mood, but a large one is harmful to the body. The man in white kept quiet, the muscles on his cheeks twitching. Farewell. He walked out step by step, each step seeming to carry the weight of 1,000 caddies. I say, if you're still unwilling to give up, I can pawn your sword as well. Yin Yang sighed slowly. Still, you should leave. You want my sword? The man in white's right hand gripped the hilt, veins popping out. How is that what I want? It's not that I'm giving you another chance to win back your losses because you're unwilling to accept your loss. Forget it, forget it. You'd better leave quickly. Yin Yang shook his head. I don't want to hurt you. The man in white had already made up his mind, striding back. I'll pawn it to you. Yin Yang's eyes widened. Brother, I was only joking with you just now. It's my fault for finding something to say. If you lose, this sword of yours will really be gone. I know what a martial artist's accompanying sword represents. Listen to my advice, don't gamble anymore. Gambling is like a pit, it's easy to get in, but it's not so easy to climb out. The man in white said coldly, say no more. I'm only asking you, do you accept it or not? Yin Yang replied, of course I do. Brother, your sword looks extraordinary. I'm willing to pay 20,000 silver taels as a pawn. I can redeem it any time. What do you think? The white-robed man's face turned green. What did you say? This sword of mine can't be bought even with 100,000 profound stones, and you're giving me 20,000 taels of silver as collateral? Yin Yang pursed his lips and said, your sword is worth 100,000 mystical stones just because you say it's worth 100,000 mystical stones? Even if he sold the entire casino, it would probably be around this amount, right? You think a sword is worth it? Why don't you just rob someone? You're the one who needs my help right now, okay? Let alone 20,000, even if it's, all right. Yin Yang said helplessly, how about this? I can appraise your sword for 100,000 silver taels, but I can only give you 20,000 each time. And only 4 times. On the 5th time, although I'll still give you 20,000 taels of silver, you're not allowed to gamble anymore. You can just take the 20,000 taels of silver and leave. This way, you'll be able to live for a period of time, and you'll have a chance to make a comeback. If you agree, we'll do it this way. If you don't, you can just take your sword and leave. The white-robed man's face darkened. He clearly knew that the fellow in front of him was leading him step by step into the abyss, but he still had to say, thank you. This feeling was King disgusting. I've only pawned 100,000 silver taels of a sword that's worth tens of millions of silver taels, and I've only been given a base of 20,000 taels of silver. Now that I've arrived, I still have to say thank you. The white-robed man entered the casino once again with an emotion that even he himself found unbelievable. A moment later. Give me another 20,000. Another moment. Give me another 20,000. Another moment. Give me another 20,000. About a quarter of an hour later. The man in white stood in front of Yin Yang in a daze, his face drained of color and bewilderment. He could clearly hear the number of points. There was absolutely no mistake about this, and there was no room for doubt. The number that was shaken was the number that he had heard. Throughout the entire process, no one had used mystical qi to play any tricks. If someone had really played a trick, he would have been able to sense it, even if it was someone at Ling Xiaozui's level. Even if he could not sense it once or twice, he would not have made such a mistake after so many times. Yet, why did he keep losing? He kept losing with a single push. No matter how confident he was, he kept losing. He kept losing all the way to the end, to the very end, to the very end. When he came, he was poor as well, but he still had 50 silver taels with him. But now, in less than 2 hours, not only had he pawned all his belongings, jade pendants, and rare metals, he still owed a huge debt of 200,000 taels of silver. Even his sword had fallen into someone else's hands. Not to mention that the debt he owed was still generating interest in an unimaginable way. Not to mention, if he were to come here at this time tomorrow, the 200,000 silver taels of debt would rise to at least 250,000. In just half a month's time, it would be absolutely impossible for him to redeem all his belongings. Due to the compounding interest, the total debt by then would be an astronomical figure that he would not be able to repay even if he were to go bankrupt for 10 lifetimes. Lost again? Yin Yang looked at the white-robed man sympathetically. Your luck, really. Why don't you take these 20,000 silver taels and leave? Come back tomorrow to try your luck. It looks like it's not a good time to gamble today. There's no hope for you to recoup your losses. The white-robed man was taken aback. Come back tomorrow. Come back tomorrow. Suddenly, the white-robed man looked at the gambling tables that were in the midst of a racket, and a sense of fear rose within him out of nowhere. He felt that these gambling tables were like a giant mouth. Once he got close, it would swallow him whole, skin and bones. The white-robed man clutched the 20,000 silver taels in his hand, only feeling bitterness in his mouth. At this moment, he hated King Qingguang to the core. He had never hated this fellow as much as he did now. He was living a good life, roaming the world and laughing proudly in the martial world. Who could do anything to him? Yet this bastard had accepted someone's commission and started to hunt him down. He had run 30,000 miles, chasing him all the way. He had chased him from Yutang's border to Dayuan, then from Dayuan to the grassland. Yet, he did not stop, chasing him all the way to Tiantang City. He had finally managed to shake off his pursuer for the time being, but he had realized miserably that he was only left with 50 silver taels out of the hundreds of thousands of silver taels he had brought with him to buy medicine, pills, information, and treatment. He had come here to try his luck, to ease the pressure on his silver taels, but more importantly, he wanted to use the pleasure of winning to dispel the frustration he had been feeling all this while. How could he have any more expectations for a gamble like this that had already been decided? How could he have known that the outcome of this gamble was not within his expectations? The result of this gamble was only to pile up his debt. How could the white-robed man not blame First Court King Qingguang? If you hadn't chased me, would I have come here? If you hadn't chased me, would I have run out of money? If you hadn't chased me, would I have been forced to gamble? If you hadn't chased me, would I have ended up like this? Even my sword has become someone else's. And I'm in a huge debt. A debt that I might not be able to clear in my entire life. First Court King Qingguang. You and I are irreconcilable. Absolutely irreconcilable. The white-clothed man gritted his teeth and cursed in a low voice. Looking at the white-robed man walking out with a pale face, Yun Yang called out to him, "Brother." The white-robed man turned to see Yun Yang's sincere smile. Is there anything else? Yun Yang held up his sword with both hands. I'll lend this sword to you for now. It's necessary for a cultivator to have a sword by his side. It'll be a pity if I don't have a suitable weapon. I was only joking with you earlier. The white-robed man felt a sudden surge of emotion. He was touched. Why? Chapter 203. Yun Yang smiled warmly. Actually, I believe it's not difficult for you to help me with this matter. Other than that, I can help you with other matters as well. Come find me when you're done and we'll discuss it in detail. I don't need your help with anything else. The man in white was almost grinding his teeth. From the moment the matter is settled, we'll be strangers. We'll go our separate ways and mind our own business. We'll have nothing to do with each other. It's a promise. A promise is a promise. Speak. It's actually very simple. You just need to do this and that. After the white-clothed man heard this, a surprised look appeared in his eyes. But your ultimate goal is only that. How precious is my promise? You're only asking me to kill one person. Yun Yang smiled warmly. You heard right. This was not going to be an easy task. Of course, that's for me. The man in white wore a disdainful expression. What's so difficult about killing one person? I still have to remind you. If you expose me in the process of doing this, then this matter won't be settled. Yun Yang reminded him kindly, this is a friendly reminder. No matter when or what the situation is, as long as you're exposed, your debt, whether it's this sword or these items, will still be mine. The man in white could only feel his anger rising. It's only natural. Yun Yang took out the jade pendants and various metals and placed them on the table. Please, just as he uttered the word please, Yun Yang stopped abruptly. Although these jade pendants and strange metals still looked the same, Yun-Yang could clearly feel that at least 95% of the spiritual qi contained within them had disappeared. Yun-Yang felt his teeth clench. He had only kept them in his embrace for such a short period of time and they had already been eaten by Emmy. However, the man in white was obviously enraged. Without even looking at them, he swept all the items into his embrace and said, "We don't owe each other anything from now on. Farewell." Yun-Yang heaved a sigh of relief. "Whatever you say. We don't owe each other anything. Remember what you've said." The man in white said angrily, "How can I, Bai Shue, be someone who goes back on my word?" Before he finished speaking, he turned around and left. Yun-Yang heaved a long sigh of relief. My God, that was close. According to Yun-Yang's judgment, the level of this man in white was at least higher than the Dragon of Clouds, Liang Yinchi, whom he had met a few days ago. If this man was enraged and confronted him directly, he would be in deep trouble. Emmy. Emmy. Yun-Yang entered the deific consciousness space with a dark expression. Emmy obviously knew that it had gotten into trouble. Its tender tendrils coiled around Yun-Yang, acting coquettishly. The tip of the tendrils coiled around Yun-Yang's body to please him and actually burrowed into Yun-Yang's armpit. It was like a little daughter who knew that she had done something wrong and was trying her best to please her father, acting coquettishly, and being obedient. All in all, it was using all sorts of methods to get into the fray. I've lost to you. Yun-Yang felt a wave of numbness, the anger within him drifting away as he warned weakly, don't do this anymore in the future, understand? Be good. Emmy waved its tendrils and rubbed them against Yun-Yang's body and face intimately. Emmy, how many more do I need before I can advance another level? Dozens of people? So few? Yun-Yang could only feel himself exiting the space filled with tenderness, a smile on his face and a sense of relief. It was then that he realized that he, who had been filled with rage earlier, did not even have the chance to unleash it. Emmy's extinguishing method was indeed superb. Now that the incident caused by the man in white had come to an end, Yun-Yang naturally shifted his attention back to the gambling table. Compared to the sudden appearance of the man in white, the generals of various countries were the real target today. However, Yun-Yang was no longer interested in the wager here. No, perhaps it should be said that Yun-Yang had never thought much of the chips and banknotes that the generals of various countries possessed. They were all prey that had entered his pocket, it was just a matter of time before they were hunted down. After a while, a certain someone shot Shui Wuyin a meaningful glance. Shui Wuyin nodded slightly without batting an eyelid. Then, the gambling skills and character of the four noble young masters exploded at the same time, as if they had been meticulously calculated. Basically, they won more than they lost at every wager. Large amounts of silver coins flowed into their pockets like the tide, leaving the generals of various countries wailing and complaining incessantly. Now do you know how powerful I am? This brother is just that amazing. Dong Tianlong had long forgotten himself as he won consecutively. Brats, remember this, all of you. From now on, this brother is the top gambling god of Tianxian continent. Don't call me Dong Tianlong or Young Master Dong anymore. Please call me by my nickname, Dong Lianing. Who the *CK are you calling a brat? The generals of the military were initially enraged by their losses, their pockets dry as if they had encountered a drought. Now that they heard such an indiscriminate barrage of insults, it was like 10 years of drought encountering hailstones. How could they hold themselves back now? They immediately retorted. Dong Tianlong chuckled. Whoever retorts is a brat. So many people have a reaction? That makes it even simpler. Everyone here is a brat, a piece of trash. Beat this bastard up. The crowd who had lost were enraged as they swarmed forward to attack. The four noble young masters did not show any signs of weakness as they went up to meet them. Come on, the fight was so intense that the sun and moon seemed to have lost their shine. While the four noble young masters were all bruised and swollen, the generals of various countries were also in a mess. Everyone knew that this was a battle between gamblers. No one really wanted to kill each other. After all, they knew each other's background. If they really hurt each other, there would be a lot of trouble in the future. Therefore, everyone was more restrained in their attacks, very, very restrained. However, no matter how restrained they were, the towering Wind Pavilion's casino was already in ruins. Even if everyone did not unleash their true strength, the repercussions were enough to destroy the casino, leaving it no longer in its original state. The result was not too surprising, but what happened next was far beyond everyone's expectations. Perhaps, it should be said that what happened next had everyone dumbfounded. With a loud bang, a group of people rushed into the casino. The swords and spears in their hands glinted coldly as they exuded a murderous aura. "Don't move." It was the city guards. Shui Wuyin broke out in a cold sweat. "We're just joking with our own people here." It's fine. However, this group of city guards refused to listen to his explanation and directly ordered, "Tie up everyone and bring them back for interrogation." While the generals were still in a state of shock, the city guards had already charged forward like a pack of wolves. With a dozen of them against one, the other party had to be cautious and did not dare to go all out. Naturally, the situation was one-sided. Very soon, all the troublemakers, including the 4 noble young masters and the generals from various countries, were tied up like rice dumplings and escorted out in a grandiose manner. "Where's Yun Yang? Where's young Master Yun?" The generals who were escorted out had only just regained their senses, but great young Master Yun, who had been at the door just a moment ago, was long gone. Yun Yang sprinted all the way back to the tower to heaven in one breath. He pushed the door open with a loud bang, scaring the old generals who were discussing inside. "What happened? This is bad. No. This is bad." Yun Yang was panting heavily as he said breathlessly, "A few generals gambled in the casino and got into a fight because they lost too much. The commotion was too big, so the city guards were dispatched and captured all of them." Silence. There was a deathly silence. Everyone's eyeballs were almost popping out of their sockets as they looked at Yun Yang, digesting the earth-shattering news that Yun Yang had brought. No one dared to believe the description that their ears had just heard. So many people had been captured by the city guards. The empire of Zio's old marshal's beard was trembling. Since when did the city guards start to care about such trivial matters? Yun Yang patted his buttocks anxiously. "Everyone, please think of something quickly. Save them. This is terrible." Amidst the shock, Han Sanha regained his composure and looked at Yun Yang with a smile. "Young Master Yun, you brought them out and watched them be captured? Is this how you treat your guests? Or perhaps this is how the Empire of Yutong treats its guests?" Yun Yang cried out, feeling wronged. "Old Marshal Han, can you not simply accuse others? What does this have to do with me? The cause of this is them causing trouble, all right? It's only right for the city guards to capture people. Not to mention the fact that I don't have an official position. Even if I'm a popinjay, even if I were a high official in the imperial court, I can't bury my conscience and forcefully stop others from enforcing the law, can I?" His words were beautifully spoken, open and righteous. Not only did he keep himself out of the matter perfectly, he did not forget to elevate himself and show off the righteousness of Yutong's officials at the same time. This was, simply, F***ck, this fellow is being treated the same way as everyone else. He's saying everything he wants. The old generals and soldiers cursed in their hearts. This bastard. When nothing happened, he patted his chest as if he was the most capable person in the world and could do anything. As long as he was around, nothing would happen. But once something happened, he would say, "I'm just a foppish young master," pushing everything aside, nothing would work. F***CKU. Everyone knew that the root cause of this incident was definitely Yun Yang's doing. Only this immoral fellow could have done something like this. To actually invite someone to prison, there was really no one who could do such a thing. Chapter 204. The youth's eyes glowed brilliantly as he looked at Yun Yang and said faintly, "Young Master Yun's tactics are impressive indeed. However, young Master Yun should ask yourself, do you really dare to kill these people?" Yun Yang slammed the table upon hearing the youth's words and roared in anger, "How can you say that? What do you mean by my tactics? I've worked so hard to bring them out to play. Am I not to be blamed for it? The situation now is that they've lost money and started fighting, causing the current situation. Am I to be blamed for this?" The youth in black said coldly, "Young Master Yun knows better than anyone else what is going on. I only have one question. Young Master Yun, you've toyed with these people like this, but do you really dare to kill them?" Yun Yang said angrily, "Do you think I don't dare? If you dare to say another word, just one word, let me hear it. King Hell, if your father can't kill them on the battlefield, can't I kill them in prison? Try saying another word. Let's see if this young master dares to kill a few of them." Yin Yang slammed the table. "Isn't it just a war? A war? When has the Empire of Yutong not been at war all these years? Who the *CK are you trying to scare?" The youth in black sucked in a deep breath and clenched his teeth, not daring to say another word. Yin Yang, who had gained the upper hand, did not give up. He kicked the table in front of him away and said angrily, King Hell, your father was sent out to be a tour guide and I didn't get paid a single cent. How could I be bullied like this? It was your own people who lost money and caused trouble by fighting ungracefully. Your father ran all the way back to deliver the message, but someone actually doubts me. God, open your eyes and see, is there still justice in this world? Justice doesn't lie in the hearts of men, right and wrong can only be determined by others. Han Sanha closed his eyes as his head throbbed. His initially calm expression was nowhere to be seen. He was now certain of one thing: if the generals from various countries continued to stay here, it would not be surprising for a few of them to die if they were targeted by Yun Yang, the bastard. It was better to leave quickly. If the plan was to be abandoned, then so be it. He could not King afford to offend this person. Forget it. I'll think of something myself, Han Sanha said with a frown. After a brief discussion with the old marshals, they walked towards Qiu Jinhan's residence in unison. This time, he was truly helpless and could only lower his head to that old bastard. They had no choice but to lower their heads. If two of those people who were caught died in there, it would be a big problem. The few of them sighed as they walked. Yin Yang continued to lecture the rest of the people. Tell me, are you being reasonable? Are you being reasonable? Ah. I'm really King a dog. Why do the generals of your countries all have this kind of quality? What kind of quality was this? CK me. Did you guys come here to ruin Yutong's culture? Poor me, who is as pure as a little white flower. I've only been with you for a few days, but I've already become so vulgar. Is there any way to do this job? Was this Yutong, Dongxian, Tianxi, Dayuan, or Zio? How lawless, all of you going against your conscience and distorting the truth, calling a deer a horse. God, I feel so miserable, so tired. The generals were exasperated as they looked at the man who seemed to be in a frenzy. This fellow was obviously in character. If your acting was so good, why don't you go be a movie king? Yet, no one dared to speak up. After the previous bloody lessons, the generals were well aware of Yun Yang's crazed personality. The more they argued, the more spirited they became. Instead, they ignored him and slowly, they gave up. My head hurts. I'm going back to my room to rest for a while. My head hurts too, my stomach hurts. I suddenly remembered something. What is it? I'm going back to my room to think. The dozens of generals stood up as if there was no one else around, rolling their eyes and walking away. They did not even spare Yun Yang a glance. Behind them, Yun Yang's incessant grumbling could still be heard. What kind of people are these? What kind of quality is this? You guys beat someone up after losing a gamble and even got caught. Such an embarrassing thing. You guys can really do it. I'm impressed. What kind of shame is this? What kind of quality is this? Bang! The generals slammed the doors shut, blocking out the demonic voice outside. All of them held their heads in their hands and sighed deeply. Each of them felt as if 10,000 mythical beasts were galloping through their knee-deep fecal soup after the heavy rain. All of them could not help but curse, this bastard. As for who they were cursing, it was a matter of opinion. On the same night, Yin-Yang turned into a gust of wind and entered the prison quietly. This was the reason why he had captured these people. Yin-Yang walked around the cell soundlessly. When he walked out, he heaved a deep sigh. He shook his head. It was not enough. Besides, there was another use for it. Why didn't that fellow give him a few more hits? The next morning, Han Sanha and the others brought the captured generals out of the yamen. However, each and every one of them was covered in dirt and grime, their heads hung low in dejection. The few old marshals had beaten and scolded them, teaching them a lesson. Then, they discussed amongst themselves. If this went on, a few of them might really die. Forget it, let's leave. Hence, on this day, the people from Zhou, Dayuan, and Tianxi bade Yun-Yang farewell without hesitation. Although they did not want to see this bastard, the blood of the hero was still on him. Yin-Yang nodded vigorously and patted his chest. Leave it to me. When the generals left, Yin-Yang collected the money for 50,000 pots of wine. Then, each country was given 10,000 pots. Before the empire of Zhou's Marshal Zi left, Yin-Yang had a secret conversation with him. When he returned, he was holding something in his hand and stuffed it into his robe. No one knew what kind of deal had been made. When the soldiers of the various countries walked out of the city gates, they were met with thousands of disdainful gazes. All kinds of whispers filled his ears. See that? This is Dayuan. Pfft. I heard that they're either lechers or gambling addicts. I heard. They're not here to celebrate Marshal Iron's wedding, but for the prostitutes. Not exactly, but not far from it. If they're not here for the ladies, then they're here to play with money. There's not even 1 in a million who's here to congratulate them sincerely. I also heard that they've been arrested after losing a bet and fighting. Why are the people over there like this? Lechers, gambling, and even taking their winnings. It's disgusting. How can people like this be generals? This is probably what they mean when they say they pick out a general from a pot. It's really destroying my worldview. Look at those people, they're all lethargic. I guess they're anxious because they didn't manage to play with the ladies. F***ck. Damn it. That's right, damn it. Get out of here. Don't ever come again. Beat them to death if they dare come again. Yes, beat them to death. The generals of the various countries walked out of the city gates with their heads hung low, too ashamed to face anyone. There was no way they could explain themselves to these people. Therefore, the journey back home could really be described as covering one's head and scurrying away like a rat. The generals of the various countries left in unison. Other than Han Sanha, all of Dongxuan's generals were sent back by Han Sanha as well. They had no choice but to go back. The tour guide they had found here was too formidable, they could not hold him back. Only Han Sanha was still there, lingering in Tiantang City. Now, only Han Sanha, the youth dressed in black, and the 8 guards were left in Tiantang City from other countries. Yin-Yang mumbled to himself. He knew that Han Sanha must have stayed behind for another reason, but he only knew the way but did not know the reason. No matter how skilled Yin-Yang was, he could still guess what Han Sanha's real intention was without any clues or evidence. However, more than 95% of the foreign generals had left. Young Master Yun, the only official tour guide, had naturally lost his purpose of existence. He had retired and gone home to count his silver taels. During the time he was entertaining the foreign generals, Yin-Yang had leaped from a destitute man to one of the wealthiest people in Tiantang City. With more than 200 million taels of silver in his hands, he could not help but feel high-spirited and proud. With a certain someone's speed of getting rich, it was undeniable that no one would be able to do it in the future, but it was undeniable that it was unprecedented. Yin Yang smiled faintly and tossed it to Emmy, taking out a piece of translucent, amethyst jade from his embrace. This was the reward that Yun Yang had asked for from the empire of Zio's Marshal Z before he left. The matter was simple. Marshal Z was of royal blood, his words held more weight than the marshals of other countries. Other than the first batch of 50,000 pots of the blood of the hero, he had also ordered the subsequent batches. This piece of jade was Yun Yang's deposit and also a thank you gift. Looking at the departing generals, Yun Yang's gaze was dark, but there was a glint of murderous intent flashing across his eyes. It's up to you all when you realize it. Yun Yang mumbled to himself coldly. After all, I am from Yutong. Chapter 205. At the inn. An invitation was presented solemnly. Han Sanha had been invited by old Marshal Chiu for a long talk. Yesterday, Han Sanha had come with a group of old marshals to plead for the old marshal to release those people. Due to the circumstances, Han Sanha had lowered his status, allowing old Marshal Chiu to hold his head high. Even now, he was still reminiscing about it, feeling a little unsatisfied. Therefore, the old marshal had invited Han Sanha over to reminisce early in the morning, hoping to rekindle the past and renew their relationship. Reminisce? Old Marshal Chiu's chuckle was full of glee, not bothering to hide it. It was a prelude. Han Sanha's brows did not waver, his expression unchanging as he said faintly, "It's been so many years, indeed, it's time to reminisce." Old Marshal Chiu chuckled and said, "Those people you came to beg me to release yesterday, have they all left the city today?" Han Sanha's face twitched subconsciously. "You came to beg me yesterday." Han Sanha sat up straight again and said seriously, "This old man has a vulgar word to say to you, shameless old man." "I wonder if I should say it?" Old Marshal Chiu coughed and said, "Since it's a vulgar word, it's better not to say it." Han Sanha snorted. After a while, old Marshal Chiu scratched his ears and cheeks for a good while before he could not help but ask, "I say, Han Sanha, you've helped those people so much. Didn't they thank you?" Han Sanha's face was as red as a date, but he remained silent. "No matter what, they should have given you some gifts, shouldn't they?" The old marshal's thirst for knowledge was strong. "Tell me, how did they thank you specifically? How many gifts did you receive?" "Old Hua, you're rich this time. Although they've lowered themselves to beg me once, it's still worth it." Han Sanha stood up and left with a flick of his sleeves. He didn't even say a word of farewell. In the face of such a shameless old thing, whose skin could be taken off and used as a shoe pad, and who specialized in exposing people's scars and taking pleasure in doing so, it was really a waste of breath to not speak a single word. Chiu Jianhan looked at Han Sanha's receding silhouette and called out loudly, "Old Han, if there's anything you need help with in the future, just let me know. As long as it's within my means, this old man won't refuse or say anything else. Actually, there's nothing we can talk about between us. Don't say anything about begging or not, that's what's really disappointing." Han Sanha's footsteps hastened, as if he could not hear anything and could not hear anything as he hurried away. The old marshal's maniacal laughter could still be heard from behind, his laughter unbridled and overjoyed. "Old fool! How dare you bully me like this?" Exiting Marshal Chiu's residence, Han Sanha's face was already ashen, his heart filled with resentment. This old bastard said early in the morning that he had something important to discuss with him and tricked him to come here. In the end, he came here to let this old bastard have a good time. After this, he did have a good time, but he was injured, and his internal organs felt like they were burning. When we meet on the battlefield in the future, I must capture this old bastard and bring him to his death. You've gone too far. You've gone too far. Han Sanha was truly enraged now, words that should never have come out of his mouth spilling out into the world. The black-robed young man followed behind him without saying a word, following him closely. As they turned a corner, the group was suddenly stunned, coming to a halt immediately. Right in front of them. A man dressed in white was standing in the middle of the road. At this moment, everyone felt as if Mount Han's ice and snow were blowing in their faces. The man in white was wearing plain clothes that were as white as snow. His face was also as white as snow. Other than his hair and eyes, which were black, the rest of his body was snow white, as if he was in mourning. It would have been fine if it was just the color of the unlucky white, but the man's age was unpredictable. It was possible to say that he was 20 years old. It was also possible to say that he was 30. It was also possible to say that he was more than 40. It was also possible to say that he was an old monster that was hundreds of years old. Not only did the unlucky white look dizzy, there was also a chilling air that was as cold as a snowy mountain. Seeing that the man's aura had been cut off, the youth in black tensed up and took a step forward, shielding Han Sanha. The 4 guards by Han Sanha's side looked as if they were facing a formidable enemy as well. Clang, 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 without a word, they had already gripped their weapons in their hands, mystical chi vortexes forming rapidly in the air. Han Sanha's heart skipped a beat when he saw this. He had never been known for his mystical cultivation base. His mystical chi cultivation base was limited, so he could not tell the depth of the man in white's ability. However, his 4 guards were mystical chi cultivators, top-notch experts. Once the man appeared, all 4 of them moved in unison, ready to fight. It was a clear indication of the man's strength. Furthermore, the fact that the 4 of them had moved first meant that they were at a disadvantage. It also meant that the 4 guards had no confidence in dealing with the man in white. They had to channel their chi in advance to ensure their safety. Who was this man in white? How could he have such an imposing aura? Who are you? The youth in black was alarmed, his hand already caressing the jade bangle on his left wrist. The man in white said faintly, "Marshal Han, is this how you treat your friends?" "Friends?" Han Sanha frowned and asked, "May I ask who you are?" The man in white said, "Marshal Han need not ask too much. I'm here on behalf of someone to protect you during your stay in Yutong." Han Sanha asked, "May I ask who asked you to do this?" The white-clothed man snorted and did not reply. His expression was filled with arrogance. "May I know your name?" Han Sanha asked. The man in white said coldly, "I am Bai Shue." Once the name Bai Shue was uttered, the youth in black and Han Sanha's 4 guards paled at the same time. White clothes fluttered in the air like snow. The person in front of him was the rumored assassin of the martial world, Bai Shue. It was said that this person had once fought with Jun Moyan, the unrivaled swordsman in the world, and had lost to Jun Moyan by a single move. Although he had suffered a severe injury from Jun Moyan's sword that pierced through his chest, he had still managed to retreat in the air, causing Jun Moyan to be unable to chase after him. He had been so elegant and composed that he could be considered a legend in swordsmanship. Bai Shue. The 9 heavens blizzard, the divine sword white robe. He ranked 6th on the swordsman chart. Han Sanha wanted to ask further. However, Bai Shue had already said coldly, "Marshal Han need not ask who asked me to do this. I won't tell you even if you do. You only need to know that if I were here to assassinate you, you would have become a corpse by now. There will be no luck involved." Bai Shue was indifferent, as if he was announcing a fact. Han Sanha chuckled humorlessly but did not speak further. What Bai Shue said was true. If Bai Shue had attacked secretly and wanted to kill him, the success rate would be extremely high. Even if it was not 100%, it would be 99%. Just by looking at his 4 guards' expressions as if they were facing a formidable enemy, he knew that Bai Shue's words were true. Not necessarily. The youth in black said coldly, "If you're really here to assassinate, it's still unknown who will die now." Bai Shue's crystal-like eyes looked at the youth in black's face as he said faintly, "Perhaps I will die as well, in addition to your hidden strength, but the target I want to kill will definitely die before me. There's no guarantee." The youth in black sucked in a deep breath and did not retort. It was obvious that Bai Shue was speaking the truth. There was no room for rebuttal. If Bai Shue were to risk his life to kill someone, there were not many people in this world that he could not kill. Han Sanha could not help but smile as he thought about it. If so, I shall thank Bai Hero Bai. Bai Ishue's face twitched as he said, I dare not. The title of hero. I don't deserve it. Since the beginning of time, those with the title of hero have died a more tragic death. There are only a few who have a good ending. The group was speechless. How were they supposed to continue the conversation when you spoke like this? A few words and the conversation would be over. Regardless, Dongshuan's people were still suspicious of Bai Yishue, the person before them, but they no longer suspected him of having the intention to assassinate the god of war. Han Sanha and his entourage had their reservations, but their desire to befriend the man had also grown after the initial fear had dissipated. After all, it would be strange if they did not want to befriend such a superb expert. Bai Yishue had successfully joined Han Sanha's team, still looking stern and unsmiling, but the rest of the group was not bothered by it. An expert had always acted independently. This was how a superb expert should be. Moreover, this was the legendary White Blade Master, Bai Yishue. It was to be expected that he would be arrogant and cold. No matter what, Han Sanha's confidence had increased for no reason. Now that Bai Yishue was their bodyguard, whoever dared to provoke him would have to go through him first. It was truly not an easy task to get through. For the next 2 days, Bai Yishue followed Han Sanha, paying his respects here and there, never leaving his side. He truly displayed the role of a superb expert's bodyguard. Although he did not smile, his methods were straightforward, adding a 99% sense of security to those who saw him. However, this great swordsman Bai Yishue was not in a good mood during these few days. His expression was even worse, as if everyone he looked at owed him a huge sum of money. The group only thought that it was beneath his status to be a bodyguard, but they did not think too much about it. From the afternoon of the second day onwards, Han Sanha and the youth dressed in black brought their guards to the 1,000-feet lake. They went fishing with their fishing rods. Bai Yishue followed them as if it was only natural. A night had passed, but they had not caught a single fish. Han Sanha was not discouraged, going back to rest for a while before going again in the afternoon. Since Han Sanha had rested, the guards had to rest as well. 2 of them were left to guard the door while the rest went to the room next door to meditate and recover their energy. I'm going out to settle some personal matters. Bai Yishue stood up with a cold expression and spoke without thinking. No one knew who he was talking to, but he walked out without waiting for the others to speak. The long sword that he always carried with him was no longer worn on his waist but gripped in his hand. I won't wait any longer. Let's finish this quickly and leave. Once this is done, I'll never come to Tiantang City again in this lifetime. I can't even see that young Master Yun again. I don't want to die because of him. Chapter 206. Sixth among the world's swordsmen, what arrogance. Watching Bai Yishue leave, a guard muttered softly with a pout. I wonder what the first place is like. Another person rolled his eyes. Look at this person's stance, he's just like the first. Another person craned his neck. Stop talking. It's his ability to be ranked 6th. Why aren't we ranked? Another person sighed. Luckily, we're on the same side now. What's wrong with being a little more tolerant? Big brother is right. Were they really on the same side? Bai Yishue strolled out of the inn, his eyes cold as he walked. His heart was filled with resentment. This reputed one shall never gamble again for the rest of my life. Bai Yishue prayed in his heart. Many people in Tiantang City knew that Bai Yishue had been following Han Sanha around for the past few days. This person was Han Sanha's personal guard. Seeing him walk over in his white robe, it was as if frost was descending on everyone's heads, causing them to move out of the way as soon as possible. They could not help but look at this fellow curiously. Where was he going? Why did it look like he was walking towards the palace? However, Bai Yishue did not actually go to the palace. Instead, he walked to the front of a residence and stopped abruptly. The residence in front of Bai Yishue was not small and it looked like it was newly built. It was probably because the mud used to build the walls was not completely dry yet. This was the residence of old Sir He-Han-Ching. It had been some time since He-Han-Ching's residence had been charred by Yun Yang's fire. The construction on the surface had already been completed. It had only been 3 days since Sir He had moved back to his residence from his temporary residence to the time when he had temporarily stayed elsewhere. He had not even warmed his seat yet. Bai Yishue stood in front of the door, watching the inside coldly, not moving. The people inside were also looking curiously at this unmoving fellow who had come out of nowhere. What was wrong with this fellow? Was he mentally ill? Why is he standing in front of our house and not moving? Is he envious of this wonderful residence? Bai Yishue's right hand moved, gripping the hilt of his sword as he said faintly, "I'm sorry. I have to do this because of my superior's orders." Before he finished speaking, a snow-white sword light flashed like lightning in the night sky. Shwa! Old Master He had just finished building the main gate, which had only been completed a few days ago, with a loud crash. Immediately, smoke and dust filled the sky. His white robes fluttered as Bai Yishue entered with his sword in hand. "Outsiders, move aside. Today, I will only take He-Han-Ching's life." This was what Yun Yang wanted him to do. Yun Yang had requested to follow Han Sanha for 6 days and asked Bai Yishue to assassinate He-Han-Ching after Han Sanha had left, but Bai Yishue could not wait any longer. "Hurry up and settle this matter. I'll leave immediately. From now on, I will never return to Tiantang City." Bai Yishue prayed in his heart. "That bastard young Master Yun, I never want to see him ever again." Therefore, Bai Yishue had come impatiently. Moreover, he had openly and brazenly killed his way into He-Han-Ching's house in broad daylight. How could the people inside actually move aside? A large group of guards charged over with angry roars. Bai Yishue's expression was cold as a murderous glint flashed in his eyes. His sword light flashed rapidly, circling the entire yard like a lightning bolt. Cries of agony rang out incessantly as the guards who had charged out collapsed to the ground. Many heads rolled like watermelons. Even if there were some survivors, they had broken limbs and were missing limbs. Fresh blood flowed into a small river on the ground. He-Han-Ching. Bai Yishue's howl shook the 9 heavens. "Come out and accept your death. Why let so many innocent people lose their lives? The only person I want to kill is yourself." A cold, hard voice that sounded like clashing metal spoke faintly. "Did Han Sanha ask you to come?" Bai Yishue swung his sword in a circle, a bright radiance turning into a circle that shielded him within as he said faintly, "No. I kill whoever I want. Do I need to be instructed by someone else?" The person sneered, "Bai Yishue, no matter who asked you to come, you shall die here today." Before he finished his words, a sharp gust of wind came whistling. The shadow of a large saber flashed in midair. The saber's light stretched 100 feet long as it slashed down brilliantly. Shameless boasting. Surprise flashed in Bai Yishue's eyes, but the long sword in his hand parried and pushed lightly. With a flash of his body, he had already charged over. It was a forceful attack, a preemptive strike against the enemy. Crack, 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 both of them were locked in a melee. Just as they were fighting fiercely, another person charged out from the side with a cold glint, aiming straight for Bai Yishue's back. The attack came without a sound, like a phantom. It was so stealthy that one would not even know if he was dead. Unexpectedly, Bai Yishue seemed to have eyes on his back. With a shake of the sword in his hand, he had already deflected the enemy's weapon behind him. Then, the sword light flashed again, enveloping the person who came after him in the sword light. The battle between 2 people had turned into a 3-man battle. Although Bai Yishue was fighting 1 against 2, he was still calm and had the upper hand. Then, another 2 cold glints came at him from the left and right. Surprise flashed in Bai Yishue's eyes, but his sword light expanded once more, like a 1,000-feet waterfall pouring down, enveloping the 2 people who had just charged out within the range of his sword light. Although Bai Yishue had the battle under his control once again, the surprise in his heart had grown exponentially. Enchanting was only an old man from the Empire of Yutong. Even if he had some reputation, what did he do to have so many pinnacle experts as his guards? This seems a little strange. Had he been tricked by that young Master Yun again? It was one thing for Bai Yishue to be puzzled, but he did not slack in his attacks. He was indeed worthy of the title of the world's sixth swordsman. His sword glinted with starlight, the cold glint was unstoppable as he suppressed all four of his opponents. They could only hold on strenuously under his sword, not losing. However, the sky was suddenly covered by darkness as a strong and heavy sound of wind breaking came crashing down. There was more. Bai Yishue was truly shocked now. He finally felt that it was not that something was amiss, but that something was terribly amiss. What did that bastard ask me to do? Did I not say that I would only kill an old scholar? Why did it feel like I had poked a hornet's nest? Wasn't this place a little too dangerous? A mere old scholar could actually have the protection of 5 pinnacle experts. Even a country's monarch could not compare to such a lineup. However, no matter how surprised he was, he still had to deal with the incoming attack. Bai Yishue's sword light flashed, the tip of his sword pointing directly at the incoming weapon. Puff! With a flip, Bai Yishue retreated 70 feet, his face flushed. The opponent's weapon was a gigantic sledgehammer. From the looks of it, it was at least 700 or 800 kilograms in weight. He really didn't expect that the attack from the sky would be a sledgehammer. This time, he made a mistake in his prediction of the enemy and immediately suffered a great loss. His internal organs were also shaken and injured. However, the person in front of him didn't have it easy either. He grunted and coughed up a mouthful of blood. His entire body was sent flying high into the air due to the violent recoil, and the large hammer looked even more shocking to the eye. While the person wielding the hammer had successfully ambushed Bai Yishue and injured him, his cultivation base was much weaker than Bai Yishue's. The moment their weapons came into contact, the disparity in mystical chi levels had caused him to be severely injured as well. The severity of his injury was even more severe than Bai Yishue's. Being unexpectedly injured, Bai Yishue was in a hurry to recuperate and recover. He still had a strong opponent in his sights, so he dared not be injured. Unexpectedly, there was a sudden tremor from the ground. A pair of hands shot out from the ground and locked onto Bai Yishue's ankles like a pair of iron pincers, twisting them forcefully. On the ground, the 5 people who had just been pushed back by Bai Yishue pounced towards him in 5 different directions, as if they did not care for their lives. Bai Yishue was shocked, but he had no choice but to give it his all when his life was at stake. "Ha!" he exclaimed in a low voice. It was as if 1,000 mountains of ice and snow had exploded at the same time as a copious amount of cold air surged into the sky. The sudden outburst was the limit of Bai Yishue's lifetime cultivation base. The person who was underneath and had restrained Bai Yishue was the first to bear the brunt of the attack. He could no longer hold on to Bai Yishue's ankles with a pained grunt, his hands were torn apart, dripping with blood. A mouthful of blood spurted up from the ground, like a fountain of blood. The 5 people who had attacked at the same time grunted at the same time, retreating involuntarily. All of them paled. Although Bai Yishue was unexpectedly injured and was restrained by the people on the ground, his actual ability was far above these 6 people. The result of his outburst was as expected, it was incredibly valiant. However, Bai Yishue was not in a good state either. His ankles were bruised, and waves of excruciating pain came from his ankles from time to time. The outburst just now had also caused the mystical chi he had used to suppress his injuries to burst as well. His internal injuries had worsened due to the strong impact. Knowing that he was severely injured, Bai Yishue spun his sword and looked around, obviously wanting to break out of the encirclement quickly and leave this strange place of trouble. Who would have thought that there would be 2 more silhouettes pouncing over fearlessly amidst the tumbling dust and smoke? There were actually 2 more. What was more infuriating was that he had not even seen the face of the old scholar called Enchanting after fighting for his life until now. What the F***ck was going on? The ground rumbled as if it had exploded again. It was the people who had charged out from underneath. Now, there were 8 people attacking Bai Yishue at the same time. Bai Yishue fought back with his sword with all his might, trying his best to keep himself from falling. However, the 2 injuries he had sustained were more than just one injury on top of another. He was gradually losing his strength. The 8 people's weapons consisted of sabers, swords, spears, hammers, whips, staffs, short swords, and a ribbon. These 8 different weapons were of different lengths, light and heavy, hard and soft, yet they worked together seamlessly and tacitly. The longer the fight went on, the more intricate it became. Bai Yishue could not help but grumble inwardly. He had probably been tricked. Today's 4th update. Seeking monthly votes. 410,000 words on the shelves. Today is the 23rd. 23 days, 230,000 words have been updated. It's not that I'm flaunting myself, but there aren't many like me after so many years, am I right? Chapter 207. Bai Yishue could not help but feel regret. He should have been more ruthless when the battle had begun and killed 1 or 2 of them with a brutal blow. Even if they were severely injured, he would not have fallen into such a dire situation. With the 8 men's teamwork, he would have needed a long battle to kill 1 or 2 of them even if he had been in perfect condition. It would have been impossible for him to kill all 8 of them. But now the situation is completely reversed, and it's very dangerous. Of the 8 people on the other side, many of them were injured, but when they cooperated with each other, they were incomparably tight, and he couldn't find any weak link. F***ck, I've been tricked again. Bai Yishue resisted and retaliated with all his might, feeling resentful. That bastard had said it was a simple mission, but he had only asked him to kill an old scholar. This place was obviously more dangerous than any dragon's lair or tiger's den he had ever been to. It was much more dangerous. It was at this moment that an even greater sense of danger rose within him. Bai Yishue roared, his sword splitting into 8 rays of sword light to repel the 8 men at the same time. Only then did he turn to look. He saw an elder with a head full of white hair standing in the yard, looking at him with his arms behind his back. The elder exuded an aura that was as imposing as a mountain and as deep as the ocean. It was only then that Bai Yishue was truly shocked. Based on the aura alone, he could tell that the other party's cultivation base was actually higher than his own when he was at his peak. Who was this person? The elder spoke faintly. This old and useless one is he Hanqing himself. I wonder why great swordsman Bai Yishue wants to kill me. Bai Yishue's heart sank coldly. F***ck. He had been tricked. That pretty boy wasn't a good person after all. The pretty boy didn't have a good heart indeed. A transcendent expert like this, one who's beyond his own limits, with 8 powerful guards, actually wants me to assassinate him single-handedly. He was King asking his father to die. Now that things had come to this, he had to make a swift decision and leave immediately. Otherwise, he might really die here. Thinking about it, Bai Yishue roared. Suddenly, he spun rapidly like a spinning top. The sword light around him flickered with a cold gleam that grew more intense. At the same time, the cold wind at the peak of the snowy mountain began to howl fiercely. Bai Yishue howled, "Those who stand in my way shall die." Before his voice echoed in the air, he was already there. Bai Yishue soared into the sky like a roller, charging towards the 3 men who were standing on top of the wall. Life or death, it all depended on this. If he couldn't make it out this time, then he would really have to die here this time. The 5 people around him roared at the same time. Their sabers, spears, swords, hammers, and cudgels all smashed towards the rolling sword light. It was obviously meant to obstruct the enemy and diminish the sharpness of Bai Yishue's sword. Bai Yishue did not evade the 5 incoming attacks. He did not change his direction either, flying forward like a long dragon. All the weapons that crashed against the sword light that was the embodiment of man and sword could only cause a ripple like the surface of water. They could not stop the momentum of the attack at all. "Get out of the way, let him go," he Hanqing shouted with a frown. His actual cultivation base was higher than Bai Ishue's, so he could see clearly that Bai Ishue was risking his life. If the three subordinates on top of the wall were to intercept him forcefully, there was a high chance that they could stop Bai Ishue, but the three men would die without a doubt. In addition, they would have to bring in 2 or 3 more people who would participate in the ambush. He could not afford such a loss right now. Ever since he had been severely injured by Ling Xiaozue, he had been severely injured and could only suppress his opponents with his aura. He could not fight at all. The 3 men on top of the wall grunted and parted to the sides simultaneously. However, the weapons in their hands had left their hands, thrown out in a desperate manner. They collided with the sword light that flashed by. The sword light scattered once more as Bai Ishue spat a mouthful of blood into the air. However, the sword light moved even faster, like a shooting star streaking across the sky, disappearing in a flash. In the blink of an eye, the sky returned to silence. At the very last moment, Bai Ishue turned back to look and was relieved when he saw that He Hanqing had not made a move. As long as this old man doesn't make a move, I have an 80% higher chance of leaving this place alive today. Bai Ishue had already disappeared into the distance, his speed like a shooting star chasing after the moon. All 8 of them knew that they could not catch up to him. Besides, the other's actual cultivation base was far above any of them. Even if 1 or 2 of them managed to catch up to him, they would only end up as food for the other. There's no need to chase after him. He Hanqing sighed, his brows locked in a deep frown. Bai Ishue is already severely injured. He has obviously lost his composure by breaking out at the last moment. A guard said, even if he survives, I believe he won't be able to do much for the time being. But why did he come? The spearhead is directed at old he himself. The other guard looked at He Hanqing in confusion. I heard that Bai Ishue is currently Han Sanha's personal guard, tasked to ensure Han Sanha's safety when he's in Yutong. He's always with Han Sanha, but why does this guard of Han Sanha want to assassinate you, boss? Another guard asked. He Hanqing kept quiet for a bit and said, Ah San, bring my name card and invite Han Sanha here for a talk. Ah San chuckled humorlessly and said, Boss, this is a difficult matter. If Han Sanha did it, how would he dare come? If he didn't do it, he wouldn't even come. He Hanqing said faintly, wrong. Whether he did it or not, he will definitely come. A gloomy black air flashed in his eyes. It was an eerie murderous intent. He said faintly, even if this wasn't Han Sanha's doing, he must know what's going on. He needs to know. He has to know. At this moment, He Hanqing's voice was several times colder, like the gloomy cries of ghosts drifting out from hell. Han Sanha had just laid down for his afternoon nap. Before he could fall asleep, the door to the Tower to Heaven Inn was kicked open. A fearless voice hollered, Where is the Empire of Dongxuan's Han Sanha? Han Sanha's 8 guards stood up at the same time, following the voice. Looking at the 2 people who had entered the Tower to Heaven Inn, they were enraged. Who are you? How dare you make such a ruckus? The person who had just arrived had called out Marshal Han's name so boldly, he had no manners at all. The person at the door said coldly, I'm here on old Sir He's order to invite Han Sanha and Marshal Han to the residence for a chat. As he spoke, a name card was passed over. Han Sanha was surprised to see the name card that had been sent in. He Hanqing. Why would the leader of the literati in the Empire of Yutong, the Grand Master of Confucianism of his generation, come looking for him for no reason? Besides, his attitude was impolite. Not only was this strange, but it was also strange. It was odd. No matter what, Han Sanha had to go to He Hanqing's invitation. No matter how he criticized the other party's invitation method, it was still a servant who had come to send an invitation. Just based on the fact that the other party was a master of literature and a leader of Confucianism, as well as the fact that he had taken the initiative to invite Han Sanha had no choice but to go. It would be impolite if he did not go, and it was not just Han Sanha who would be impolite, but the entire empire of Dongxian. After all, Han Sanha's official identity was the representative of the Empire of Dongxuan's military. However, when Han Sanha saw He Hanqing, he immediately understood that he had made a mistake coming here. No matter how impolite it was still better than entering a dangerous place and facing danger head-on. The meeting between the two of them proceeded swiftly. Once the conversation started, He Hanqing went straight to the main topic. I'm ashamed to say this, but this old man was assassinated just now. I'm sure Marshal Han doesn't know about this yet, He Hanqing said softly as he brewed tea. Han Sanha was taken aback. Assassination? Just as it happened, He Hanqing's men had already arrived at the inn. Han Sanha was in the Empire of Yutong after all, how could he be so well informed? Therefore, he definitely did not know about this news. However, why would old He ask such a question? Someone actually dared to assassinate old He, how audacious. I wonder if the assassin has been caught. Han Sanha asked, concerned. With his experience, how could he not tell that there was a deeper meaning in He Hanqing's words? He could also see that He Hanqing's expression did not seem to be in a good mood, but Han Sanha would never have thought that this matter would be related to him, not even in his wildest dreams. Caught? How could I have caught him? He Hanqing shook his head and sighed. That assassin was confident in his high cultivation base. When he came to assassinate me, he did it openly and openly. If it weren't for the few righteous men here who risked their lives to protect me, I wouldn't have been able to prevent the assassin from taking my muddle-headed head. Huh? A direct assassination? The assassin is really bold. Do you know the identity of the assassin? He should have been arrested and brought to justice. Han Sanha exclaimed. He was even more confused about He Hanqing's purpose in inviting him here. What did provoking an assassin have to do with him, a marshal of another country? Was the assassin sent by him? Arrest? It's easier said than done. This old man is a weak scholar, my knowledge of martial cultivation is shallow. I only remember that the assassin had introduced himself as Bai Shue and that this has nothing to do with anyone else. He only wants to kill me, He Hanqing. The righteous men who protected me just now said that this person is one of the top swordsmen in this world, one of the top swordsmen in the world. It was only a fluke that they could barely deal with him. Old He explained. His eyes that seemed to be blurry from old age were gleaming with an icy chill as he looked at Han Sanha's face. Bai Shue? Is it really him? Han Sanha was dumbfounded, asking subconsciously. Is Marshal Han surprised as well? It's really this legendary pinnacle of swordsmanship. He Hanqing said warmly, I just don't know how this old man offended this expert, to actually be like this. Swoosh. Chapter 208. Han Sanha finally understood why He Hanqing had invited him here. He would never have thought that He Hanqing would encounter an assassination attempt and that the assassin was actually Bai Shue. Bai Shue was now his guard in name. Who else would He Hanqing look for if not him? Han Sanha sucked in a long breath and chuckled humorlessly. So this is why Elder He has sought me out. He Hanqing's eyes that seemed to be blurry from old age scanned Han Sanha and said evenly, there seems to be one less guard by Marshal Han's side. Bai Shue has indeed been my guard for 3 days, Han Sanha said without hesitation. He Hanqing chuckled. Then, what does Marshal Han want to tell me? Han Sanha chuckled bitterly. If I say that this has nothing to do with me, will Elder He believe me? He Hanqing said, I've often heard that Marshal Han's words carry weight and you never go back on them. This old and useless one shouldn't have doubted you. It would be fine if it was only this old and useless one's life, but the few righteous men around this old and useless one wouldn't want to watch this old and useless one die. This old and useless one doesn't want to chill the hearts of the righteous men, so I'm just asking for Marshal Han to produce something believable. Han Sanha felt a splitting headache. His question of whether he believed him or not was his last struggle. He was betting that Elder He would give up on pursuing the matter due to his identity. He knew that the other party would definitely want evidence, but he was still hoping for a fluke. It was a pity that things did not turn out as he wished. It was inevitable that he would pursue the matter. According to Marshal Han, Bai Shue only became your guard 4 days ago? He Hanqing asked. May I ask Marshal Han, with Bai Shue's identity and background, why would he be willing to be your guard? The question was straight to the point. With Bai Shue's swordsmanship cultivation base and status, he did not even care about important positions like a nation's protector or the commander of the Imperial Guards, much less a marshal's guard. Was Han Sanhe not being a little too arrogant? Han Sanhe chuckled dryly. He only said that he was entrusted by someone to protect me. He Hanqing asked, may I ask who entrusted him with this? I don't know. When Han Sanhe uttered the word, his eyes were almost closed, his heart filled with bitterness. He knew that he had been tricked unknowingly. You don't even know who sent him, yet Marshal Han is so at ease to keep him by his side. He Hanqing chuckled, is Marshal Han's heart big or broad? Han Sanhe chuckled bitterly. I know it's hard to believe, but this is the truth. This marshal has no other proof. He Hanqing smiled and said, it seems that Marshal Han really has nothing else to say to me? Han Sanhe said seriously, old he, my life hasn't been mediocre. The things I've done aren't to the point where I dare not admit to them. I really don't know anything about this. Completely unaware. Old he chuckled meaningfully and said, does this mean that Marshal Han has no idea where Bai Shue has gone to now? Han Sanhe sighed helplessly. No matter how he tried to explain, it would be futile. Based on the current situation, the facts spoke louder than words. This black pot was firmly pinned on his back. Looking at the chilling glare in Old He's eyes, Han Sanhe felt helpless. He stood up to bid farewell and said, this is all I can say. If Old He has nothing else, I shall take my leave now. The eyes of the two people behind He Hanqing gleamed sharply as they said indifferently, could it be that Marshal Han's subordinates have done such a rebellious thing, and Marshal Han is only going to give a few words of explanation, and you're thinking of leaving? Han Sanhe sucked in a deep breath, suppressing the rage within him, and said, does Old He intend to make me stay here today? He Hanqing smiled faintly. Of course not. Send the guest away. Han Sanhe stood up to bid farewell. He Hanqing did not move, remaining seated as he said darkly, I wonder when Marshal Han will return. The martial world is treacherous and treacherous. Please take care. Han Sanhe's footsteps paused. How could he not hear the heavy threat in the words? He said faintly, thank you for your concern, Old He. I will say this solemnly, this has nothing to do with me. He Hanqing did not speak, as if he had not heard anything. A cold smirk hung on the corners of his lips. When Han Sanhe walked out of the residence of He, his expression was dark. This kind of injustice, this kind of inexplicable blame, how could it fall from the sky? It was simply unimaginable and inconceivable. Who was it that was plotting against him? An old scholar who has long since left his position. How dare he threaten me like this? Does he really think he's somebody? Han Sanhe closed his eyes and sighed. He wondered if he should return home in advance. Although He Hanqing had not stepped foot in the imperial court for many years, his influence on Yutong's royalty was still considerable. If he spoke to His Majesty, Han Sanhe would not be killed just like that, but it would be difficult for him to do anything in the future. With such an enemy lurking in the dark, it would be difficult for him to achieve anything in Yutong. There was no point in staying any longer. Han Sanhe heaved a long sigh towards the sky. He had always prided himself on being able to predict the enemy's moves, taking every conceivable possibility into account and planning before taking action. However, ever since he came to Yutong, he realized that everything that had happened was beyond his expectations. Many of the arrangements he had prepared beforehand had all been for naught. It was the first time in Han Sanhe's life that he felt like he had used up all his strength or that he could not exert his strength. He turned back to look at the residence of He subconsciously, thinking that He Hanqing's incident had rendered him speechless. He did not even understand who was plotting against him. Those who were involved in the gambling were already on their way back home. Han Sanha had no idea what was happening to them. Even if he wanted to discuss it with someone, there was no one to ask. That night, Han Sanha and the youth dressed in black were still holding onto their fishing rods, sitting by the 1,000-feet lake, fishing quietly. Behind them, the 8 guards stood guard in various positions. The night was dark and quiet. "Gugu, are you sure you can catch it?" Han Sanha said in a low voice. "I heard that Ling Xiaozui has been here before this and has probably left with his catch. With the Kirin fish's habits, it won't be easy for it to take the bait again within a short period of time." The youth dressed in black, Gugu's tanned face was filled with confidence. There are no absolutes in this world. Ling Xiaozui was able to catch it mostly because of his patience and luck. Of course, it's hard for him to catch it twice. It's true that ordinary people won't be able to catch it again. However, the bait I'm using is a special bait that my master has been researching for 100 years. It's specially made to target this unusual fish. My master had caught more than 10 Kirin fish consecutively in a day at Blackwater Lake. The bait is irresistible to the Kirin fish, it won't fail. That's great. It's a pity that the Kirin fish in Blackwater Lake is hard to catch. Otherwise, we wouldn't have to come all the way here, Gugu said regretfully. Han Sanha said regretfully as well. The Blackwater Lake is now extinct for the Kirin fish. Gugu said, "It's not to the extent of extinction. There's still the king of the Kirin fish in Blackwater Lake. There's still room for reproduction. It's a pity that the level of the king of the Kirin fish can't be caught no matter what. Otherwise, the king of the Kirin fish would be more than 100 times better than the ordinary Kirin fish." Han Sanha said, "Is that so?" Gugu sighed. Master's secret bait contains the fragrance of the fish's soul. Other than the king of the fish, it's an irresistible temptation to the other Kirin fish. We only need to be patient. No matter what, there'll be a Kirin fish that will take the bait. Han Sanha's expression that had been gloomy for days finally showed a hint of a smile. "That's great. When we get the Kirin fish, we'll return immediately." Fishing at the 1,000-feet lake? Yin Yang's eyes widened as he read the message from the 9 heavens dictum in his hand. Han Sanha was going to the 1,000-feet lake to fish. He had traveled thousands of miles to come here, but now he was fishing every day. How could he have so much leisure time? In spite of this, Yin Yang understood the situation quickly. The main purpose of fishing at the 1,000-feet lake must be the Kirin fish. However, he did not expect that one of Han Sanha's main goals in coming to Yutong would be this as well. Yin Yang stood up and paced around, his brows knitted together. According to what he knew and the Kirin fish's habits that Ling Xiaozui had described the other day, the Kirin fish in the 1,000-feet lake had already been caught by him once. It would be impossible for anyone else to catch it within a short period of time. However, it was impossible that Han Sanha did not know this, yet he still wanted to try. He must have had something else to rely on. It was better to be safe than sorry. If there was really an accident, the aftermath would be long. All in all, Yin Yang did not want Han Sanha to accomplish anything in Yutong. What he wanted to accomplish was what Yin Yang wanted to destroy. Thinking about it, Yin Yang turned into a cloud of smoke and vanished in the blink of an eye. Only the soft sound of the wind could be heard in the sky. In the 1,000-feet lake, a strange fragrance slowly spread in the water. In the depths of the water, there was already a faint flash of rainbow. The Kirin fish had already begun to move. The wind blew. A soft sound that was barely audible came from afar, as if something had entered the water. Han Sanha frowned and said, "Why does it sound like someone has entered the water?" A guard behind him bowed and said, "Marshal has good hearing. Someone has indeed jumped into the water on the other shore. However, the other side is 10 miles away from here. The impact is minimal. Marshal need not worry too much." Han Sanha nodded and continued fishing. The youth dressed in black was even more composed, his lean body shrouded in a loose black robe. He was like a statue, not even the sound of his breathing could be heard. Up until this point, the situation of ordinary fish biting the hook had become less and less frequent. It had been a full hour since the last success and the float had not moved. Han Sanha and the youth dressed in black were fully focused, knowing clearly that the Kirin fish in the water had most likely begun to move. The divine fish moved while the ordinary fish retreated. In other words, the moment the Kirin fish took the bait was only a matter of time. Chapter 209. Han Sanha and Yun Yang waited with bated breath. Yun Yang, who was under the water, had already dived into the deeper water soundlessly. Like a large fish, he swam leisurely in the deep waters, moving more nimbly than when he was on land. This was not an illusion. Once Yun Yang entered the deep waters, he could feel the difference. He did not feel suffocated or uncomfortable underwater. Instead, he felt at ease, safe and joyful. The lake water around him seemed to have become a part of him. There was no longer any gap between them. In the water, he breathed freely, his limbs moved according to his will, and the harmony was indescribable. In fact, Yun Yang felt that he was even more comfortable on the ground right now. Every pore on his body showed a comfortable feeling, as if they had been opened. He could do whatever he wanted with just a thought. As he reached out his hand, he traveled more than 1,000 feet at the bottom of the lake without making a sound. There was not even the slightest movement in the water beside him. It was already a rare miracle, but not only did the fishes around Yun Yang not avoid him, they even swam around him to keep him company, but they maintained a certain distance from him. It was a strict suppression of their levels. When he did not exude his aura, all the schools of fish that he met as he swam were silently escorting him, or rather, they were lining up to welcome him. The feeling was marvelous, perhaps, it was an indescribable sense of wonder. Suddenly, a rainbow shadow flashed and a Kirin fish appeared in front of him. It gently swayed its tail as if it was confirming something. Then, with a wave of its tail, it rushed into his arms and swam back and forth in his arms. From time to time, it would rub its face and body against his, full of joy. Yun Yang flashed a sincere, gentle smile, his heart growing calmer. Following the flow, he dove down quickly. At this point, many of the rainbow silhouettes had been attracted by the strange fragrance and were about to be unable to resist it. However, when Yun Yang arrived, all of them followed him back without exception, swimming towards the deep waters without any hesitation. The 1,000-feet lake is indeed as bottomless as the rumors say. How is this just 1,000 feet? Yun Yang dived all the way down, but he still could not see the bottom of the lake even after several thousand feet. After a while, Yun Yang was shocked to realize that there was a bottomless abyss under the lake. About 4,000 to 5,000 feet into the abyss, he could see other Qilin fish swimming about. Another 3,000 feet down, there were more and more Kirin fish. They swam back and forth like many rainbows dancing and lingering in the air. There were even a few Kirin fish that swam out and wiggled around Yun Yang, as if expressing their closeness. Yun Yang chuckled. He had yet to reach the bottom of the abyss, but he could already see a huge hole on the side. Countless Kirin fish were swimming in and out of it. That should be the nest of the Kirin fish. Based on Yun Yang's estimation, the number of Qilin fish here was shocking. There were at least 1,000 of them. The largest Qilin fish that he had caught earlier finally appeared. When its gaze met Yun Yang's, it became lively and rushed over, rubbing its lips against Yun Yang's face with indescribable joy. Yun Yang realized that the Qilin fish that he had let go did not appear sickly or weak after spitting out their essence. Instead, they had grown much bigger. Although it had only been a short time, their bodies had grown at least twice as big as before. It seemed that the qi of vitality that he had given them was indeed what the Qilin fish needed. It was even their favorite and most effective supplement. Yun Yang wanted to communicate with the Qilin fish at once, but then he realized that even though he was compatible with the water, he was still a human after all. How could the Qilin fish understand his words? Due to the language barrier, Yun Yang released his deific consciousness in an attempt to communicate with the Qilin fish. Deific consciousness was an ability that all living beings who cultivated in this world could obtain. It was the same for humans and fishes. With the Qilan Fish King's level, it might even possess deific consciousness. Sensing Yun Yang's deific consciousness, the Qilan Fish King was stunned for a moment. Its tail stopped moving and it lifted its head to look at Yun Yang, deep in thought. Then, Yun Yang's deific consciousness received a message of. Yun Yang could not help but be overjoyed. Could it really be like this? The Qilan Fish King had cultivated deific consciousness? Although he was not sure if the Qilan Fish King had deific consciousness, this was not the main point at the moment. Yun Yang communicated with the deific consciousness once more. The anglers above have ill intentions. The unique fragrance is a bait. Don't go up and try to control yourselves in the future. Don't go up and eat the things that suddenly appear. No matter how many good things there are up there, don't be tempted. Good things that fall from the sky must be accompanied by danger. If you can't resist it, you'll lose your life. After communicating with the fish 7 to 8 times, the Qilan Fish King seemed to have understood. It flipped its body in the water angrily, its tail coming out with a splash. Then, the Qilan Fish King opened its mouth. Yun Yang could feel a strange frequency emanating from it. Then, swoosh, 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 countless Qilan fish gathered from all directions. Even some Qilan fish that were only the length of a thumb and might have just hatched came over, forming a black mass. Yun Yang, who was floating in the water, could not help but gape as he watched the mystical scene unfold. The king fish was floating high on a rock, as if it was sitting on a throne. Below it was a crowd of Kirin fish. The biggest ones were at the front, and the rest were lined up according to their size. It was very orderly, and there was not the slightest bit of chaos. At the very back were the newly born fish seedlings. All the Qilan fish were lined up neatly and tidily, lifting their heads to look at the Qilan Fish King above. Then, the Qilan fish began to lecture. Yun Yang did not know what exactly it said, but he could feel the strange frequency fluctuating continuously. However, he did not understand a single word. Just because he could not understand it did not mean that the fish could not as well. The fishes below swayed their tails uneasily. After another wave of fluctuation, all the Qilan fish dispersed. All the Qilan fish that weighed less than 5 to 6 catties were chased into the water flow inside the cave while the larger Qilan fish stayed nearby. There were actually 8 Qilan fish that weighed dozens of catties swimming back and forth at the entrance of the cave, but they never left the direction of the cave. Once other Qilan fish swam there, they would be chased back immediately. Yun Yang's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. The Qilan fish could actually do this? This was no different from humans setting up their armies and waiting for battle. Whether the Qilan Fish King had cultivated deific consciousness or not, the fact that the Qilan fish possessed such high intelligence meant that it lived up to its reputation as a heaven and earth species. It was extraordinary indeed. Yun Yang had achieved his goal. After this incident, Han Sanhe would definitely have no chance. Naturally, Yun Yang was about to return. Before Yun Yang left, he had informed the Qilan Fish King with his deific consciousness, telling it that he wanted to return. The Qilan Fish King panicked, appearing in front of Yun Yang with a swoosh to block his way. Its tail swayed wildly before it bumped its large head against Yun Yang's chest. "You're not letting me go? Or do you have some other idea?" Yun Yang pointed at his own nose. The Qilan Fish King sent out a vague thought before it nudged Yun Yang with its head, pulling him backwards. "You want to bring me somewhere?" Yun Yang could vaguely understand what was going on. Turning around, he swam in the direction of the Qilan Fish King. The Qilan Fish King hopped happily before it came to Yun Yang with a swish of its tail, leading him towards the other end. After a while, it would turn back to look. Seeing that Yun Yang was still following, it twisted its body happily and led the way again. Yun Yang followed the Qilan Fish King and had unknowingly swum dozens of miles. His surroundings grew darker. If Yun Yang was not in sync with the water now, even moving would be a problem. Along the way, he did not even come across a Qilan fish, much less an ordinary fish. However, the further they walked, the wider the lake became. Yin-Yang even suspected that the 1,000-feet lake was actually connected to the ocean, judging from the way they were walking. Not only was the water getting wider, but the walls of the cave were also getting weirder and weirder. The kingfish's body was shining brightly, but it couldn't emit any light at all. It was all dark and gray. After a while, a faint light appeared in front of them. Yin-Yang could not help but feel invigorated. Although Yin-Yang did not care much about his surroundings, as long as he was human, he would prefer a place with light. No one liked pure darkness. The Qilan Fish King increased its speed as well, swimming forward with a swoosh. Finally, after passing through a patch of water plants that looked like ribbons, Yin-Yang felt a sudden brightness in front of him. When Yin-Yang came here, he realized that the water level was only above his knees. It did not affect him standing up and walking. However, the Qilan Fish King's body was relatively large, so it had to swim with its body flat to maintain its movement in such shallow water. For its current size, it was rather arduous. Yin-Yang raised his head and looked into the distance. Right in front of him, there was a black stone platform that was only slightly protruding from the water. There was only a strange rock with a pit in the middle on the stone platform. As for the pit, there was nothing at all. The Qilan Fish King supported itself up with its tail with difficulty. It turned its head and gestured to Yin-Yang. Yin-Yang was taken aback, but he did not hesitate, wading through the water. When he came to the front of the strange rock and studied it carefully, he realized that the pit was not completely empty. There was a faint layer of mist that was emitting rainbow colors within. It was really just a thin layer. As long as it was a little further away, it would not be visible. Chapter 210. Yin-Yang looked at the kingfish in confusion, not knowing why it had brought him here. He dared not act recklessly, waiting for the Fish King to give him a further hint. The kingfish slapped the surface of the water with its tail happily, splashing water everywhere. It then swam over and leaned on Yin-Yang's leg, not moving an inch, as if it was resting. Resting? Yin-Yang did not know whether to laugh or cry. Why did you go through so much trouble to bring me here? What exactly do you want? You can't be resting on me like this, can you? Just when Yin-Yang was at a loss, he felt an indescribable pressure descend upon him. It felt as if the sky had suddenly collapsed. At the same time, there was an inexplicable sense of palpitation, as if the ground beneath his feet was trembling inexplicably. The surface of the water rippled slightly. The kingfish snuggled closer to Yin-Yang as if it was comforting him. Don't be afraid, it's all right. Yin-Yang did not know whether to laugh or to cry. Fortunately, after a while, he saw a ray of light shoot out from the stone wall above. It was a pure purple light that grew bigger and bigger, like a bubble that kept expanding. Slowly, it grew to the size of a human head and hung above the pit. A series of gurgling sounds resounded from the ground. Then, a colorless gas suddenly emerged from the pit and shot upwards. Coincidentally, the gas hit the purple ball that was suspended in midair. With a crisp, puff sound, the smoke suddenly surged in all directions like a sharp arrow. After the smoke arrow was refracted, its momentum did not diminish. It struck the walls of the cave, causing the walls in all directions to vibrate. After the smoke arrow was rebounded a second time, it once again formed a new ball of smoke above the pit. However, this ball of smoke was no longer colorless. It had turned into a colorful glow. It flowed and circled faintly. It was slow, but it was continuous. Seeing this, the kingfish let out a shrill cry as if it was cheering. It nudged Yin-Yang's waist with its head, gesturing for him to move forward. You mean for me to collect this? Yin-Yang asked, pointing at the colorful ball in shock. At this moment, the ball of colorful smoke had already begun to dissipate. The Fish King seemed to be anxious. It rushed over again and again, raised its head, opened its mouth, and took a deep breath. A large cloud of smoke rushed into the kingfish's mouth. It turned to look at Yin-Yang, its tail slapping the surface of the water impatiently. Quick, do as I say. Yin Yang grinned. After all, he did not know what it was, so he dared not move recklessly. However, looking at the King Qilan fish's relaxed expression, he guessed that the smoke would not be anything bad. Doubtfully, he moved closer, opened his mouth and inhaled. Who knew that when he inhaled, the moment the colorful smoke entered his mouth, Yin Yang felt the mystical qi in his dantian vibrate abruptly. Then, a strange sensation arose, filling his entire body with a warm, indescribably comfortable atmosphere. In the deific consciousness space, Emmy that was wriggling around suddenly quietened down. Its vines that had never stopped waving froze in the air, its leaves curling up as well. In the next moment, it unfurled itself abruptly and began wriggling violently like never before. Aya, Emmy looked like it was about to die from anxiety. The Fish King only inhaled 3 times, which was less than 1/10 of the entire ball's volume. After that, it stopped inhaling and laid down in the water. It even closed its eyes, obviously digesting the power contained in the smoke. 3 mouthfuls was obviously the highest it could withstand. Yin Yang could already feel Emmy's urgency. After a moment of hesitation, he channeled his qi into his dantian and sucked in with all his might. Using his mystical qi as a foundation, Yin Yang's suction was not only stronger than the first time, it was even stronger than the kingfish's absorption. The colorful smoke ball turned into a stream of smoke at once, slowly entering Yin Yang's mouth. Emmy was getting more and more ecstatic, wriggling and twisting its body. Aya, at the same time, he hurriedly absorbed the colorful smoke into his spiritual sense space and placed it around his plant. The 2 translucent green leaves kept rolling up, unrolling, rolling up again, and unrolling again. The vines waved in the air. With the cooperation of the 3 parties, it only took a moment for the rainbow-colored smoke, which was originally the size of a head, to be completely absorbed. Even the thin layer of smoke that had accumulated in the pit on the stage was gone. Peace returned to the surroundings. Yin Yang could only feel that he was different from before, but he could not pinpoint exactly what was different. He was a little confused. In spite of this, Emmy in the space was in a state of satisfaction that it had never experienced before. It wriggled around endlessly, its soft cries of Aya echoing endlessly. After confirming that the 7-colored smoke had been completely collected, Emmy wasted no time, absorbing the 7-colored smoke into its plant at once. Its thin and slender leaves were gradually thickening, the area of the leaves expanding as well. Its color had turned into a dark green that was close to black. It was a sign that the plant was extremely healthy. Other than that, the vines grew thicker as well, their length almost doubled. Yin Yang watched the changes with a dumbstruck expression. He was finally sure that the mysterious colorful smoke was a rare treasure. It seemed that he had encountered a legendary opportunity today. Yin Yang had never seen any heaven and earth treasure that could make Emmy undergo such a rapid and shocking change. Emmy was a species of boundless power that was born from the power of heaven and earth. Ordinary heaven and earth treasures might not even be able to elevate it by a level. However, under this strange smoke, there was such a huge change. Therefore, one could imagine what kind of good stuff this smoke was. In addition, his meridians seemed to have been strengthened inexplicably as well. Yin Yang tried cultivating and realized that the toughness of his meridians was at least 10 times stronger than before, perhaps even more. Most of the energy contained in the colorful smoke had been absorbed and stored by Emmy, yet he could still achieve such a huge improvement. How far had all the energy of the colorful smoke gone? In spite of this, Yin Yang only knew why but not how. He had no idea what was happening in front of him. What kind of smoke was this? How could it contain such a miraculous and vigorous power? Why did such a thing happen? This was definitely not man-made but a miraculous phenomenon that only appeared after some kind of miraculous coincidence by the power of heaven's creation. This was heaven's creation, the mystical wonder of God. It was not something that could be achieved by a human. The king of Qilan fish had already woken up from the absorption of the colorful smoke. It was obvious that it had improved as it dashed around in the shallow water like a horse. Water splashed everywhere. Yin Yang noticed that the rainbow color of the king of Qilan fish seemed to have deepened. It looked like the colorful smoke was extraordinarily useful to the Qilan fish as well. The king of Qilan fish brought Yin Yang all the way here and happily brought him out again. Along the way, its fat tail splashed water everywhere. It was obviously in high spirits and full of pride. Halfway through the journey, Yin Yang laughed and hugged the king of Qilan fish's head, rubbing it affectionately and transferring a gust of air of vitality into the king of Qilan fish. The king Qilan fish was delighted by this gift. When it realized that the air of vitality that Yin Yang had given it this time was actually more than the last time, it began to spin around in the water like it was dancing. With a swoosh, it had gone thousands of feet away. With another swoosh, it had returned, and with another swoosh, it had gone out again. The man and the fish left the unpredictable abyss in their respective states of joy and returned to the 1,000-feet lake. Yin Yang was really about to leave now. The king of Qilan fish followed behind him reluctantly for a long time. Go back. Yin Yang patted the king of Qilan fish's head and comforted it. I'll come again in the future. We'll meet again. This sentence was not false. How could Yin Yang not come when there was such a magical creature here? Even if Yin Yang did not come himself, Emmy would pester him to come often. The king of Qilan fish rubbed its huge rainbow fish head against Yin Yang's chest like a spoiled child, pestering an adult to not leave. Its infatuation was different from Emmy's, but it touched Yin Yang just as much. It only stopped reluctantly after being comforted repeatedly. Watching Yin Yang leave from a distance, it lay there and did not move for a long time. Yin Yang's fortuitous encounter under the water this time was indeed a great benefit, although he did not realize it himself. However, Han Sanha and the youth dressed in black who were by the shore looked miserable. The stage of ordinary fish biting the bait had passed, so it should be the Qilan fish's turn. However, for some unknown reason, the ordinary fish species that should not be attacking them had begun to attack in batches. Carps, grass carps, snakeheads, silver carps, and so on and so forth. The youth dressed in black's fish soul incense was specially made for the Qilan fish. If it could attract the king of fishes like the Qilan fish, it was only natural that it would be more enticing to the ordinary fish species. What was worse was that even though there were plenty of fish species attacking them, there were no bigger fish. They were all small fish that weighed about half a catty, biting the bait in a frenzy. There was not much of the priceless fish soul incense, but all of it had been fed to these small fish. In the end, when the bait of the fish soul incense had been used up, there was not even a shadow of the Qilan fish to be seen. This matter was really too strange. It was too king strange. What exactly was the problem? Chapter 211. Han Sanha and the youth in black, who knew that they had lost everything and their hopes were dashed, looked at each other speechlessly. Could it be that there are no Qilan fish in this 1,000-feet lake? The youth in black looked indignant as he uttered an answer that he himself did not believe. Han Sanha frowned without saying a word. He was puzzled as well, but he did not want to fool himself. If there are no Qilan fish in the 1,000-feet lake, why did Ling Xiaozui come here specifically to fish? The youth in black mumbled to himself, according to my master, what Ling Xiaozui needs the most is the Qilan fish. Wherever Ling Xiaozui stops to fish, there will definitely be Qilan fish. There's no doubt about this. Our fish soul fragrance is the most precious medicine in the sect. It's much more advanced than the bait Ling Xiaozui uses, and it's specially made to target the Qilan fish. It doesn't make sense that he can fish them but we can't. It doesn't make sense. The youth in black felt like he was about to break down. The effect of the fish soul fragrance was so potent, its rarity was naturally the same. Whether it was the ingredients or the difficulty of its production, it was beyond the imagination of an ordinary person. He had brought so much fish soul fragrance out this time, thinking that he could accomplish something big in one fell swoop and harvest a large number of Qilan fish, allowing his cultivation base to take a leap. Who would have thought that they would all be fed to the small fish? If this were to be brought back to the sect, even if his master doted on him and would not really blame him, he would definitely become a laughingstock in the sect, an eternal joke. Did you know that Master's precious Gugu brought the fish soul fragrance out and caught a bunch of small fish? Ha ha ha. I'm delighted to hear that. Gugu felt like she was going crazy when she thought of the scene. Can we be sure that Ling Xiaozui really caught the Qilan fish in the 1,000-feet lake? Han Sanha asked softly, could it be that Ling Xiaozui didn't catch any as well? The youth in black fell silent. It was unclear whether Ling Xiaozui had caught the fish or not. After all, no one dared to look for Ling Xiaozui to verify the matter. If Ling Xiaozui didn't catch any, then perhaps this 1,000-feet lake really doesn't have such fish. Han Sanha said. The youth in black lowered his head in silence. Let's go back. Han Sanha sighed. After all, this Qilan fish is a heavenly treasure. If it could be obtained so easily, I'm afraid, it wouldn't be that precious. Han Sanha comforted him, with your peerless potential of 9 innately awakened chakras, you will definitely be an exceptional figure in the Tianxian continent in the future. Perhaps, not taking this shortcut is your good fortune instead. The young man in black sighed and stood up unhappily. This is the only thing we can do now. The two of them didn't even pack up their fishing rods and just left them there. Since they couldn't catch any Kirin fish, what was the point of keeping these fishing rods? He stood up and sighed as he slowly walked back. I've already reported to the school about Bai Shue. The youth in black said, my master has already sent someone out to look for this Bai Shue. We have to demand an explanation from him. Gugu, Bai Shue is no ordinary person. What about the people your master has sent? Could it be? Han Sanha reminded him, you must ensure that everything is safe. Don't let your guard down. The youth dressed in black, Gugu, said, this time, my master has sent eldest senior brother. Eldest senior brother had fought with Bai Shue back in the day, so he knows him well. I believe there won't be any accidents. Don't worry, Marshal. The black-clothed youth paused for a moment before saying, Marshal, I'm actually surprised by another matter. Han Sanha was stunned. What is it? The youth in black thought for a moment and said, actually, I have my doubts about old he Hanqing. Han Sanha was stunned again and said in surprise, what does Gugu think? Just come. The youth in black said, Marshal, do you still remember the situation when you first met Bai Shue? Han Sanha was an enlightened man as well. With a quick thought, he could vaguely guess what the youth in black was referring to. Are you saying that he Hanqing's words are not entirely true? Not entirely true, I have my doubts. Marshal, please think about it. The 8 guards that you've assigned to you are all top-notch. Although they aren't among the world's top experts, 4 of them can fight against the world's pinnacle when they join forces. Even if they can't win in the end, they can still put up a fight for a while. However, Bai Shue doesn't care about the 4 of them joining forces. Perhaps, Bai Shue can easily break through their teamwork. This is also the main reason why none of us refuted when Bai Shue dared to say that he could kill you, Marshal. Marshal, your defensive formation can be said to be top-notch no matter which country it is in. But how could old he escape Bai Shue's ambush? Based on the righteous man he spoke of? The youth in black said in a low voice. Han Sanha thought about it for a moment and said slowly, he Hanqing has a reputation and is highly respected in Yutong. Perhaps he really has some expert helping him. The youth in black said, if that's the case, then old he is even more remarkable. To be able to assemble a formation to fight against Bai Shue, the capability he possesses is already terrifying. He said that he's targeting us. Our return journey is going to be a tough one. Han Sanha nodded. I understand what you mean. Tiantang City is indeed not a good place to stay. Since we didn't get the Kirin fish this time, let's go back as soon as possible. The youth in black replied, yes. Turning to look at the calm surface of the 1,000-feet lake, a sliver of indignation flitted across his eyes. Early in the morning the next day, Han Sanha sent someone to deliver a letter from him to old Marshal Chiu's residence, informing him of his departure. Chiu Jianhan finally heaved a sigh of relief when he saw the letter. The plague had finally left. When he wanted to send the letter off, he was told that Han Sanha and his entourage had already left the city gates and were at least dozens of miles away from the city. "It's life or death if we meet again," Chiu Jianhan sighed and raised his goblet, toasting from afar. "Han Sanha, have a safe journey." Just as Yun Yang woke up, he saw Lao Mei and Fang Mafei standing outside the door with grim expressions. "What is it?" Yun Yang asked as he wiped his face with a towel. "Something big has happened. Bai Yixue is here," Fang Mafei said. Yun Yang nodded faintly. "I'll go take a look." When he saw Bai Yixue, Yun Yang could not help but be shocked. Bai Yixue had come, but he no longer looked like a human. Although he was still standing, he looked extremely disheveled. Only his eyes were glaring at Yun Yang. His white robe that was initially spotless was now ragged, hanging on his body in strips. Blood stains covered him from head to toe. There was a bloody hole on his shoulder and dozens of bloody holes on both sides of his thighs. Had it been someone else, he would have died long ago with such severe injuries. "What is going on?" Yun Yang asked in shock. "Brother Bai, how could this be?" It would have been better if Yun Yang had not spoken. Once he did, Bai Yixue's eyes reddened. "What is going on? Don't you know what is going on?" Yun Yang grinned. "I really don't know." Bai Yixue's eyes were almost spitting fire. "Don't King play dumb with me. Tell me clearly, what kind of person is that he Han Qing?" Yun Yang said in surprise, "The Grand Master of Yutang's literati, the leader of a generation of scholars." Before he could finish, Bai Yixue had already interrupted him in exasperation. "What *t literati, what leader of scholars? King set someone up." Bai Yixue growled in an unusually low voice. "Even when I was fighting the concourse of the underworld, I wasn't as disheveled as I am now." Bai Yixue was truly aggrieved. He had never seen someone set him up like this. After leaving the residence of Bai Yixue realized that he had become everyone's target. No matter where he ran to, there would be assassins waiting for him. No matter who he met, they would attack him. He had been ambushed more than 120 times. How long had it been? What was worse was that there were more than a dozen of those who had fought with him, whose cultivation base was similar to the 8 people in the residence. There was even one whose cultivation base was obviously a notch higher than his, who was searching for him. If it were not for Bai Yixue's vigilance, he would have long been dead. Now, however, he had turned from an idler to a street rat, a target that everyone wanted to beat up. Even when he had been hunted by First Court King Qingguang, it had not been as dangerous as it was now. First Court King Qingguang was alone after all. Even when he was being hunted, there would always be time for him to catch his breath. This time, however, it was like a dragnet that was endless, coming one after the other. When he killed a 5th peak, a 7th peak appeared. When he killed a 7th peak, a 9th peak appeared. When he injured and chased the 9th peak away, a few perfected ones appeared. Then, more powerful ones popped up one after another. It seemed that as long as he could continue fighting, the other party would continue to send out stronger and more powerful ones until he was killed. Bai Yixue could no longer hold himself back from the current situation. After the latest intense battle, he had activated the blood soul escape, exhausting his potential to unleash his extreme speed to find Yun Yang. Who knew that a person's fart could hit his heel when he was down on his luck? On his way back, he had actually met First Court King Qingguang, who had disappeared for more than 10 days. After a bout of fighting, he had been severely injured and was on the brink of death. Finally, he had managed to escape with his life. He struggled his way to Yun Yang. "I have to get to the bottom of this today." The more Bai Yixue thought about it, the more he felt wronged. He said in grief and indignation, "What kind of tiger's den have you made me barge into? There was no way to play with people like this." You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.